The Random Life, A Day in the Life of a Substitute Teaching Uber Driver by Steph Prince. Chapter 1. The first time I ever went to Long Island was when I took an Uber passenger there. He was an older Italian man from Philly who talked the entire 3-hour ride. He wasn't annoying, but he had a whole lot to say. After kissing his wife goodbye, he got in my car and immediately started talking. "How you doing? My name is Robert, but you can call me Bobby. Bobby from Philadelphia." He asked me my name, but he couldn't pronounce it, so he said, "You know what? I'll call you Ralph. No problem, Ralph. I'll call you Ralph. And thanks for the ride. I'm 55 years old and I just had a seizure. How can you predict these things?" He was a lawyer who worked in Manhattan. Instead of commuting from Philly every day, he stayed in New York during the week and came back on the weekends. But since he just had a seizure, he wasn't allowed to drive. As we cruised up the turnpike, he started talking about his family. "Hey, listen, Ralph, I'm all about family. Us Italians are all about family. I have 2 kids and a beautiful wife. I love them to death. Do you have family, Ralph?" "Yes, I do," I told him. "Okay, good. Love your family. I'm telling you, love your family. Are your parents still alive?" I told him that yes, both of my parents were still alive, and he said, "Good. I'm glad to hear that. You have good parents, Ralph. I can tell. You're a good man. Listen, if there's one thing I know, all we have is our families. My name is Robert from Philadelphia, but you can call me Bobby." Oh man, I was so glad to meet this guy. Bobby from Philadelphia? Who is this guy? He quickly became one of my favorite passengers. I was thinking to myself, he's an Italian lawyer who lives in Philly and works in Manhattan. I'm sure he met some powerful people in his lifetime. We eventually got to Long Island, and when I turned into his neighborhood, the GPS took me to a doctor's office. "Is this your place?" I asked. "Yeah, that's right. I live above the doctor. I pay $700 a month. Can you believe it? I'm living on Long Island for $700 a month. I must be a lucky man." He was lucky because later that night I went online and searched property values, and his neighborhood was very expensive. $700 a month, he kept saying. I parked in his driveway, then gladly brought his bags to the front door. He was right behind me, walking up the steps just fine, but suddenly he stopped, sat down, and had to catch his breath. That's when I realized how much the seizure really affected him. "Thanks again, Ralph. You're very helpful. I'm an old man over here. I just had a seizure, and here you are coming to my rescue. I'm telling you, Ralph, your parents raised you right." Then he said, "Hey, Ralph, before you go, I want you to do something. I want you to stop at a store called Uncle Giuseppe's. They have the best Italian food in the area." "Okay, I may just do that. Have a good evening, Bobby." "Exactly, so you're gonna go. Good. Uncle Giuseppe's is right down the street. When you get there, go to the back towards the deli. Get the turkey sandwich for $7. Can you believe it? $7 for a turkey sandwich on Long Island?" "Yeah, that's amazing," I said. "And another thing. When you go to the deli, tell him Bobby from Philadelphia sent you. Bobby from Philadelphia." All of a sudden, I started thinking, is he in the mob? Go to the deli and tell him Bobby sent you? Was I getting sent for? I don't like stereotyping people, but he was mafioso to the core. I doubt he was a wise guy, but definitely a connector guy, 100%. About 5 minutes later, I was still trying to leave, but he just kept talking. "Hey, Ralph, I need you to do something else. Down the street from Uncle Giuseppe's, you're gonna see a gas station. I want you to go there and pump your gas. I know the owner. His name is Mohammed. Awesome guy. You would love him. He came to this country with no money, and now he's a millionaire. In one lifetime, the guy becomes a millionaire. So anyways, you're gonna pump your gas, then make a left turn, and you'll see Uncle Giuseppe's." At this point, I had to leave, so I thanked him one more time for the great conversation, but he just kept talking. "Don't forget, Ralph, make a left at the gas station, Uncle Giuseppe's $7 turkey sandwich, tell him Bobby sent you." I said, "Okay, Bobby, sounds good. Have a good night." "You have a good night too, and remember, stop at the gas station and you'll see Mohammed. Pump your gas, clean your windshield, use the bathroom if you need to, and before you leave, make a left, Uncle Giuseppe's, tell him Bobby from Philadelphia sent you." He finally shook my hand and said goodbye. I should have gave him a hug because he was so nice to me. He told me so much about his family, about business, and about life in general. Now these are the passengers who I don't mind run their mouth, not the ones who talk about, well, we'll get to that later in this book. So I started my car, then drove to the back of the doctor's office to make a U-turn. As I pulled back towards the street, I looked at Bobby one last time. He was trying to tell me something, but my windows were up. I pulled the window down, and the last thing he said to me was, "Don't forget, Ralph, make a left at the gas station." As I drove off, I started laughing to myself. Bobby from Philadelphia? Who is that guy? And what am I doing on Long Island? I don't know a single person here, except for Bobby and Muhammad, I guess. Anytime Uber takes me far away from my house, I always explore that area, and this day was no different. I drove around Long Island, randomly making left and right turns in neighborhoods I've never seen before. I was wasting gas and didn't even care. About an hour later, it was time to leave, but first, I needed food and gas. I GPS'd Uncle Giuseppe's, and when I took a close look at the map, I also saw a gas station. That's Muhammad's spot. I gotta visit Muhammad. I got to the gas station, but when I looked around, I didn't see anyone who looked like a Muhammad. So I pumped my gas, slightly disappointed, then drove to Uncle Giuseppe's. Before getting out of my car, I sat in a parking lot and stared at the sign, Uncle Giuseppe's. I was laughing to myself as I kept hearing Bobby say, $7 sandwiches, can you believe it? I walked in the store and went straight to the back, and just as Bobby said, I saw the deli. Two guys were behind the glass. One was cutting meat and the other was making a sandwich. "How can I help you?" I heard. I told him I wanted a turkey sandwich, and he said, "I got you, buddy, $7. He made the sandwich so fast I gave him a $10 tip. Then I told him this was my first time on Long Island. "First time? Welcome to Uncle Giuseppe's. Hey, Vinny, this guy never been here before." Vinny walked over and said, "Nice, welcome to Uncle Giuseppe's and welcome to Long Island. What brings you here?" I told them that I work for Uber, and he said, "Oh, that's nice. Well, listen, next time you're in the area, feel free to stop by again." I thanked them both and grabbed my sandwich. Then I thought about Bobby. Should I say something or should I just leave? Then I thought, what the heck, I'll never be here again. I might as well say something. So I walked back to the counter and said, "Hey, I just want to let you know my Uber passenger recommended this place. He told me he comes here all the time. Do you know Bobby from Philadelphia?" The guy stopped what he was doing and said, "Bobby from Philadelphia?" "Yeah," I said. "Wait, Bobby from Philadelphia? You know Bobby?" I told him yes a second time, then he turned to Vinny. "Hey, Vinny, he knows Bobby." "Oh yeah, which Bobby?" "You know, from Philly." "Wait, Bobby from Philadelphia? You know Bobby?" I told them yes, and they looked at each other, then slowly looked back at me. Then Vinny said, "Oh, okay, so you know Bobby. That's good, you know Bobby. Bobby's a good man. He's one of the good guys. We love Bobby." I don't know who Bobby was, but their demeanor definitely changed after I mentioned his name. At this point, it was getting late, so I told them goodbye, and they wished me a safe trip. By the way, that turkey sandwich was so good, it didn't even make it to my car. Like an animal, I finished it while walking out of the store. A few moments later, I was back on the highway starting a 3-hour journey back to Delaware. I was laughing to myself the entire ride, thinking, who is Bobby from Philadelphia? Chapter 2. I'll never forget this one specific day when I just finished teaching a middle school class and a student told me, "You're the best substitute teacher ever." I thought to myself, who, me? Later that day, I was driving an Uber passenger, and when I got to her house, she said, and I quote, "You're probably the best Uber driver I've ever had." Again, I thought to myself, me? How did I become the best teacher and driver on the same day? I thought about it for a while, then it hit me like a slap in the face. I finally cracked the code. People want to be left alone. This brings me to the following 2 rules that I created for Uber drivers and substitute teachers. Number 1, don't make eye contact. And number 2, only speak when spoken to. If you follow these rules, Uber driving and substitute teaching will be easy. For this book to make sense, think about the differences between full-time teachers and substitutes. When you were a student, remember your initial reaction when the teacher was out? Drake said it best, 0 to 100 real quick. Imagine witnessing Drake's lyrics on a daily basis. Every time the bell rings, I hear Drake. I'm not complaining though. For many years, I only had a student's perspective, but now I get to see everything from a teacher's point of view. When dealing with teenagers, I've learned to have no expectations. You can't predict their behavior, so don't even bother. The same is true for Uber passengers. I have no idea who these people are, so I don't judge them. When they get in my car, I just go with the flow. One morning I was in Philly when I picked up a girl named Jessie. She was in her early 20s with long blonde hair and bright blue eyes. After getting in my car, I quickly realized she was a fast talker. I mean a straight up motor mouth. She told me all about her life, her criminal history, pending court cases, boyfriend drama, everything. I guess she thought I didn't believe her because out of nowhere she told me to turn around. I turned and saw her pointing at a house arrest ankle bracelet. Jessie was trespassing. Then came the prison stories. Dealing with commissary, dealing with lawyers, arguing with doctors, self-defense. She told me a lot. From the back seat she yelled, "You ever take a shower with 30 women?" I told her, no, not yet. And she said, "Well, in prison I have. I've seen enough ass and titties to last 5 lifetimes. Some passengers don't speak, so I turn on the radio. But with passengers like Jessie, turn the radio off. Jessie looked like a regular girl who worked at the mall, not a drug-abusing criminal. This is why you shouldn't judge a book by the cover. You would never think she had a criminal history. And when it came to drugs, she proudly did everything. "I smoked every single drug on earth," she said. And based on the way she was acting, she probably smoked something from Mars. Then she told me all about her lovely boyfriend. He was arrested so many times, she finally realized he was bad luck. But when she tried to dump him, he retaliated by parking her car in a towaway zone. That's where I came in. I was taking her to the impound to get her car. She had 2 more weeks of freedom before going back to prison. I asked if she had any plans and she said, "Nope, not at all. Just gonna roam around the city for 2 more weeks." Then I asked, "What about the bracelet? Aren't you on house arrest?" She said, "Yeah, but I know how to remove it without triggering the system. And technically, I shouldn't even be in this car with you." We both laughed. Then I asked if I was transporting a fugitive, and she said, "Matter of fact, yes you are." We laughed even harder. It's easy to laugh when you're not the one about to go to prison. In fact, after dropping her off, I bought some coffee and took a nice long walk by the river. Freedom. I dropped her at the impound and she handed me a $5 tip. "You're the best Uber driver I've ever had," she said, "and thanks for not judging me." Honestly, I'll never forget Jessie. As the saying goes, different strokes for different folks. I can't speak for her family and friends who might have cut her off by now, but she was very nice to me. Passengers like Jessie are priceless. When you allow them to speak, they'll tell you everything. And the same thing happens in schools. I don't know what it is about me, but for some reason, students always tell me their problems. Remember, only speak when spoken to. I've never been a full-time teacher, only a substitute. Big difference. For one, full-time teachers actually know the students. They know names, behavior history, the parents, and as strange as it sounds, they know what happened yesterday. Every day the kids ask me, "Excuse me, Mr. Substitute, yesterday we did such and such. Can we do it again?" Then, after giving them permission to do such and such, a teacher walks in and yells at the class, "Stop taking advantage of the sub. You know you're not allowed to do this." Substitutes don't know anything. I don't know any names. I don't know what happened yesterday. I have no authority, and at any moment, the class is going to be a mess. And I'm fine with that. Tear the class apart. I don't care. I only wish they gave me a job title which better matches the job description, like zookeeper. I've been to many schools and taught every grade level. I've met administrators, I've met parents, I've done hall duty, lunch duty, recess duty, and bus duty. With that being said, I have yet to meet a student. But I've met tigers. I've seen a zebra beat up a hyena. I don't know how much zookeepers get paid in the actual zoo, but schools pay us about $100 a day. The last paragraph is funny to me because my classes usually get rowdy. Even though I try to maintain order, it never lasts. Sometimes it gets so loud that the teacher next door storms in to see what the hell is going on. And when the students see that teacher, everything changes. The kids quickly run to their seats and put their phones away. The change in volume is so drastic, you could hear a pin drop. Remember, I'm just a sub. I don't have any power. But a full-timer does. They can suspend these little creatures. They say you don't get a second chance to make a first impression, But what if I told you there's an easy way to improve yourself? If you work with a different group of coworkers every day, wouldn't you reinvent yourself every day? That's substitute teaching in a nutshell, bouncing around to different schools and working with different people. The best part about subbing is you can work anywhere you want. Out of the 20 school days per month, you can work at 20 separate schools. It's totally up to you. In fact, the more I switch, the better I like the job. The following is a sneak peek into a substitute teacher's routine. First thing in the morning, you'll go to the main office to sign in. Then you'll go to your assigned classroom and introduce yourself to neighboring teachers. Teachers are very easy to get along with, and you'll have a bunch of conversations with them. The topics will range from the news, sports, technology, or the fist fight you saw the last time you visited the school. Then when the bell rings, you'll introduce yourself to 25 students you've never met before. That's 5 periods per day, 25 students per period. Do the math, you get the point. Since switching schools is the best way to improve your people skills, I wouldn't recommend long-term assignments. Instead, keep it random. Switching schools every day is an effortless exercise in self-improvement. Public speaking classes are good, but substitute teaching is better. You're getting paid to publicly speak. Imagine a guy who hates going to the gym. Then imagine another guy who loves playing soccer. Both of them will get in shape, but one uses a lot less willpower. Switching schools will also improve your soft skills. Soft skills are defined as personal attributes that enable someone to interact effectively with other people. In other words, you're a people person. Teachers interact with every personality type, and Uber drivers do the same. From one passenger to the next, you have to adapt to each conversation. I remember picking up a data scientist who worked for Bank of America, and the stuff he told me about data collection was scary. We had an amazing conversation. After taking them to work, the very next passengers were prostitutes. 2 of them, both in their early 20s. I picked them up from a beat-up hotel in Newark around 10 a.m., and based on what I overheard, they had a great time last night. But it definitely took its toll. Their hair and makeup were a mess, and they smelled like sweat. Plus, they were dressing very skimpy. Every body part was hanging out, but no complaints from me. They were very nice to me, probably because I didn't run my mouth and get into their business. Their destination was over 15 miles away, and I overheard every detail of their conversation. I needed an STD test just from listening. As I approached their destination, I clearly heard one of them say, "This driver is way better than last night's driver." It felt good to hear that, but what did she mean? Well, in hindsight, I knew exactly what she meant. Remember, people want to be left alone, especially Uber passengers. I'm not saying we didn't speak, I just didn't initiate anything. Unless they spoke to me first, I kept my mouth shut. I can only imagine how aggressive the previous driver might have been. One look at these girls and he probably pressed them like the 95 Knicks. Looking at their outfits, many drivers would have made a move. Or maybe their driver was an older lady who criticized them, who knows? Either way, they said I was the better driver, and it was nice to hear that. When I was their age, around 20 years ago, I would have made a fool of myself in that car. Not because I was corny, but more so because my timing sucked. If you want to improve your timing, start subbing in public schools. Debating with students, breaking up arguments, and reading body language all become second nature. If you're too nice, students will test you, but if you're too tough, you'll be exhausted. Maintaining silence in a classroom isn't easy, but remember, I'm speaking from a sub's perspective. Full-time teachers can raise their voice once and the class gets quiet. Their words don't expire, but a substitute teacher's words expire fast. If students misbehave, the quick solution is to kick them out, but that could be a problem. Now the other students want to get kicked out. Monkey see, monkey do. The key is to get the worst behaved students on your side, and for some reason, I'm good at this. Just keep them busy, passing out papers, taking attendance, answering the phone, anything like that. Let them sit in the teacher's chair too. You know the leather chairs with the comfortable armrests? I've seen students fight over that chair. If you don't like switching schools, you can choose long-term assignments. You'll stay in one location for a week, month, or even semester. The staffing agency doesn't care what you choose, but me, I don't do long terms. I keep things fresh by switching schools daily, partly because I don't mind meeting new people, and also because I don't have to create new jokes. One joke can last a full week when you teach at 5 different schools. Some teachers prefer long-term assignments. They think that if they consistently see the same students for weeks at a time, they'll eventually get respect. I agree in theory, but there's no guarantees. Even though most students are well behaved, some are extremely disrespectful. In my opinion, the best way to understand teenage behavior is to teach at different schools as often as possible. In other words, switch schools daily. When I look back, I always wanted to drive Uber, but never pulled the trigger. I didn't need the money, and I definitely didn't want to wear out my car. Then one day, I bumped into an old friend of mine named Sal. He was on a lunch break, but he was wearing shorts and a tank top. I was curious what he did for a living, so I asked. Uber, he said, it's so easy. For the next 20 minutes, he told me everything about Uber. I was so intrigued, I almost joined that night. A few months later, I was at a diner talking to a guy wearing flip-flops and a basketball jersey. He was also an Uber driver. During our conversation, I asked him a whole bunch of questions, and what do you know? He repeated everything Sal had already told me. I was finally convinced. I joined Uber that night, and it took about a week for them to approve me. As I said, I didn't need the money, but I quickly became addicted to the random life. Chapter 3. So far, I didn't mention one of the best reasons to become a substitute teacher: janitors. Janitors are some of the most realistic people you'll ever meet. I hate to say this, but back in the day, we used to make fun of janitors. But fast forward 30 years, janitors are now my best friends. They're some of the most interesting characters you'll ever meet in life. When you get a chance, talk to one of them. Put it on your bucket list. Let's see. Skydiving, check. Traveling the world, check. Get drunk with 3 janitors, check. Here's what I noticed about janitors. They always have the inside scoop on every topic. Whether it's news, sports, entertainment, drugs, they know every detail of every topic. How is that possible? How do they do it? By the way, I love janitors and they're great people, no doubt about it, but I have to say this, all of them are missing teeth. On second thought, that might be a topic they don't know much about. Teaching always makes me nostalgic. Go to any school as an adult and you'll think about the things you did, then you'll think about the things you wish you did. I should have ran track. I should have worked in the school store. I should have spoken to my counselor. I should have joined a drama club. I should have joined a chess club. I should have sold weed. Just kidding, I played chess. Another fun part of subbing is hall duty. I think I finally figured out why students cut class so often. Roaming an empty hallway is surprisingly fun. During hall duty, my main job is to make sure each student has a pass. Most of them are taking bathroom breaks, but some of them are cutting class. When they walk past me, they always recognize me from a prior visit. Yo, I remember you. You're the cool sub. I usually high-five the female students and shadowbox with the boys. Then I demand a hall pass. Where's your hall pass, youngin'? If they don't have one, I reply, well, guess what? I don't have one either. I'm cutting just like you. Every time the bell rings, classes switch. And every time classes switch, the hallways get crazy. Students are screaming, music is blasting, and there's always a high-speed foot chase. But during hall duty, everything is different. Walking down an empty hallway and hearing my footsteps echo in the distance is priceless. Walking down a quiet hallway is funny in another sense. I can easily tell which other classes have subs. They're the rooms that sound like football stadiums. As I walk by the commotion, I make eye contact with the sub, then I quickly look away. I don't want to be summoned for help. No offense, but I'm on hall duty. I also enjoy hall duty for the artwork. Posters that I ignored as a student have a much deeper meaning now as an adult, especially the science and Black history ones. I also love the political posters students make for school office. Vote for Megan and let's have fun. Vote for Charlie. Go seniors. Sometimes I visit the band. I peek in the classroom, introduce myself to the teacher, then lean on the back wall. Don't mind me, I'm just a sub. I love the puzzled looks. One time I approached a few trumpet players and said, "Hi guys, you know what? When I was your age, I played the trumpet just like you." When I said that, I tried to sound as corny as possible. They looked at each other like, who the hell is that? They probably thought I was a new janitor. Teachers don't have a specific dress code, so when I untuck my shirt and forget to shave, I could definitely pass for a janitor. Other times, I visit the auditorium to watch the drama team practice a school play. Back when I was in high school, I couldn't care any less about the drama club, but as a substitute teacher on hall duty, you can find me eating lunch in the back of the auditorium, enjoying a play rehearsal. When I first started subbing in 2006, I tried to be the cool sub, but within the first week, I found that to be a terrible idea. I learned something interesting though. The cool substitute is the one trying not to be cool. The cool substitute is the one minding his business and keeping his mouth shut. You'll know if students want to talk to you. They'll initiate the conversation. Otherwise, don't say anything. Trust me, they don't want to hear anything you have to say. Through trial and error, I learned that reverse psychology works very well on students. If a student is blasting music on his phone, don't tell him to turn it off right away. That won't always work for a substitute. Instead, say, turn that up. At first, he'll be confused. Turn it up? He'll hesitate to turn it up. He might even turn it off, which is what I wanted in the first place. But this isn't guaranteed to work though. Some students might honor your request and the whole room will sound like a nightclub. I've developed a simple method to get students to behave and do their classwork to a certain extent. It's a method I call the ghost. Basically, I literally act invisible. The ghost doesn't care if you finish your assignment. The ghost doesn't care if you're on the phone. The ghost doesn't care about foul language. God knows I've tried to stop students from cursing. Impossible. You have a better chance driving home blindfolded. The ghost only cares about his routing number and direct deposits. The ghost also prefers second lunch. Second lunch is the perfect lunch for substitute teachers. The problem with first lunch is the students enter your class way too hyper. Think about it. They just finished eating a school lunch loaded with sugar. And to make them even more hyper, they probably saw a cafeteria fight. Then when the bell rings, they stop at the vending machine to purchase a few energy drinks, aka soda. Then one by one, they all run in your class with enough energy to run a marathon. Oh, we got a substitute! The last thing they want to do is sit down and be quiet. Now you got to deal with this crap for the next 90 minutes. Then there's last lunch. Last lunch sucks because... Last lunch just sucks. I'll leave it at that. This brings me to second lunch. Second lunch is perfect because 1, the students already met you. 2, they already know they have a sub. And 3, because you already set the tone for the class, they're a bit more relaxed when they return from lunch. Substitute teachers must choose battles wisely. If you're lucky, students will obey 2 of your commands, 3 max. If a student is blasting music while wearing a hoodie, you better address the music and ignore the hoodie. If you make the mistake of addressing the hoodie, then 1 minute later addressing the music, I hope you like new school rap, because that's exactly what you'll hear until the bell rings. I've seen countless arguments between students and faculty, especially when it comes to hoodies. Take off the hoodie. Why? I said take it off. Okay, I will. Now. I said I will. You're still wearing the hoodie. Take it off. Okay, I will. Ugh, such a waste of energy. An early morning argument over absolutely nothing. The hoodie finally comes off, then 5 seconds later goes right back on. Personally, I don't care if students wear hoodies. Who cares what they wear? Who cares where they sit? Assigned seats? Really? No chance. Don't even bother. Why would students listen to me, a substitute teacher, if they already ignore the principal? Not all students are bad though. Some are extremely helpful. But if one bad apple spoils the bunch, imagine what 15 bad apples can do. They'll wear you out. Don't test them, don't instigate them, and don't kick them out. Just blend in and keep everything peaceful. Take attendance, pass out the assignment, then get the hell out of there. Although subs must choose battles wisely, full-time teachers have authority. They also have parent contact information, which changes everything. On the contrary, subs have zero authority. So here's a question. If a substitute teacher finds a way to gain each student's respect, wouldn't you consider that brilliant? I would, especially in today's society. These kids are crazy. Some students are crazy and smart, and some students are crazy and dumb. But every now and then, you'll bump into a student who's smarter than the teachers. Something I had to learn was, just because a student doesn't care about college doesn't mean he doesn't care about his future. I've met some brilliant kids who fail every single class. At one high school, there was a Mexican student who always cut class to visit me. Whenever he saw me from the hallway, he would walk into my room, give me a hug, and call me Pops. Yo, Mr. T, what's up, Pop? You're like my second dad, you know that, right? He would even help me teach classes that he didn't belong in. I would ask him, yo, don't you have other classes to go to? Nah, bro, I'm staying here with you, he would say. He was only 14 years old, but he knew everything about the automotive industry. He showed me videos of him and his uncles building cars from scratch. He knew how to tint windows, install car stereos, and paint. And on top of that, his family renovated houses. He showed me more videos of him and his dad installing toilets and sinks. This kid was only 14 years old, but had the skills to make a six-figure income. Every time I saw him, I would say, "You're my hero, man." And he always responded with, "Nah, yo, I'm trying to be like you." The reason why I'm mentioning this student is, I'm almost certain he's failing every class. Kids from the inner city operate on respect. Even if you're the worst teacher in the world, city kids will love you if you properly connect with them. A lot of them don't live with their fathers, so when they meet a black man who cracks jokes with them, such as myself, it's an easy connection. A sub shouldn't focus on the class assignment. Instead, focus on gaining respect. The assignment probably won't get done anyway. Gaining students' respect is a skill quickly developed when you switch schools as often as possible. Don't take a long-term assignment only because you think it might be easier. Trust me, the grass isn't always greener. Here's an example of why I no longer accept long-term assignments. Imagine teaching a 5th grade class filled with 11-year-olds who won't stop screaming. At the end of the day, trash is everywhere, desks are flipped, and you have a monster headache. Now, imagine having to teach that class again, the very next day. Or even worse, what if you accepted a 3-week assignment? Ugh, forget that. I'd rather drive Uber. Since most students love me, they're happy when I return. Yo, you're back, Mr. T, you're back. Yep, I'm back, but not for long. See you in 30 days. Then they say, please come back tomorrow. You're the best sub ever. A principal once told me something funny. Whenever students praise a substitute teacher, the sub is probably doing something wrong. Of course they love you, he said. You let them eat in class. We laughed in agreement. Then I told him some of my teaching strategies. I told him I treat my classes like customer service treats customers. I put students on hold. The principal liked my analogy, but quickly referenced another job. We're more like traffic cops, he said. You ever see traffic cops work a busy intersection? Cars go wherever the hell they want. I may not know everything about the rideshare industry, but I do know this. Your customer service skills will drastically improve if you follow my 2 rules from Chapter 2. They're applicable to both subbing and driving. Remember, instead of telling passengers your life story, keep quiet and let them do all of the talking. Also, make sure to act oblivious to certain situations. One time I drove a woman and her kids to an empty parking lot so she could drop them off to their father. The kids were extremely happy to see their dad, but the parents didn't even speak to each other. They barely made eye contact. When the kids switched cars, it looked like a drug transaction. The mother got back in my car, and I could feel some serious tension as I drove her to work. The best thing to do in that situation is turn up the volume and act like a ghost. No small talk. When I first started driving, I thought I was supposed to talk to passengers, entertain them, so to speak. I remember taking a guy to an auto shop called White's. He got in my car and said, "Yo, what up? I'm going to White's." I said, "Okay, I got you." As I started driving, I tried to make small talk, but within 5 seconds, he interrupted me and said, "Just take me to White's, man." No problem. Lesson learned. I was in Oakland a few years ago, and on the way to the airport, my Uber driver would not stop talking. The moment I got in his car, he said, "What's up, bro? Going to the airport? What city you from? You going home or you on vacation?" This is a big no-no in my book. I never ask passengers where they're flying to. Most passengers want to ride in silence, especially the ones going to the airport. And because I don't speak, airport passengers always give me big tips. But this Uber driver didn't care. He started telling me about his upbringing, what it was like to grow up in Oakland. Then he told me all about his real estate business. He didn't do anything wrong, but I didn't feel like talking. And since I'm not from Oakland, I wanted to look out the window and enjoy the city one last time in silence. But some people can't help themselves. They have a certain quota and they're going to get these words out no matter what. When I got home from Oakland, I went online and searched the phrase, "My Uber driver sucks." Now, I'm not saying the Oakland driver sucked. I was just curious to see what would come up. Well, it was very educational. One comment said, "Hey driver, I don't care about your new album. I don't care about your master's degree. Just take me to work." Another comment said, "You drivers need to realize that sometimes the most peaceful part of my day is my Uber ride. So let me ride in peace. I don't want to hear your problems." After reading that, I knew exactly what to do. Only speak when spoken to. Most passengers don't speak, but some of them get in my car mid-sentence. Before I put my car in drive, they're running their mouth. I drove one guy who was talking about Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. He really hated Hillary. He asked if I was liberal or conservative, so I told him both. I never got into politics, I said, but I gotta be honest, Trump is very entertaining. Boy, was he glad to hear that. From the back seat he yelled, "I think he's entertaining too." At first, the conversation was going just fine. We were talking and laughing about a whole bunch of stuff. But due to my laid-back personality, I guess he felt safe to really speak his mind. Out of nowhere, he said, "I don't like Muslims. I don't like Islam. I don't like any of them." I didn't respond. Then he asked if I was Muslim. You should probably ask a person's religion before bashing it, but even if I was Muslim, nothing about him offended me. He was just an older guy from a different generation. So I told him, "No, I'm not Muslim. I don't worship Allah. I worship money." He immediately started laughing and literally said to me, "I like you, man. I feel as though I can tell you anything." They say your gift is the one thing you do best with the least amount of effort. Getting along with people has always been easy for me. And thanks to Uber, I get to interact with all walks of life. And if I ever visit space, I'll get along with aliens just fine. In fact, some of my friends from high school were probably aliens. One in particular. Ask my brother, he knows who I'm talking about. This particular passenger was a 64-year-old white guy who drove trucks for a living. And he was missing plenty of teeth. He'd probably make a good janitor. I picked him up from Claymont, and it took nearly an hour to get to Philly because of traffic. I wouldn't call him an alien, but he was definitely a clay monster. Shout out to the clay monsters. Again, my brother knows exactly what I'm talking about. During the ride, we talked about a lot of different things like movies, women, DMV scams, government cover-ups, normal stuff drivers talk about. Before dropping him off, he told me he's working for one more year, and on his 65th birthday, he's calling it quits. Very interesting guy, and I wish him the best. I love passengers like these. They're harmless. They just need someone to talk to. They might ask you a few personal questions, but they're not going to interrogate you. Speaking of interrogation, I picked up one guy who had no etiquette when it came to boundaries. He was a very strange person. He asked me if I had kids, and when I told him no, he seemed annoyed. Then he asked me why I wasn't married. "What are you waiting for?" he yelled. "You need to get married." This was a 55-year-old man with 2 kids, ages 2 and 4. I asked if it's hard raising a 2-year-old in his 50s, and he said, "The kids aren't even mine. They're my wife's kids." So I said, "I guess that's cool as long as you love your life." "Who said I love my life?" So I laughed and asked, "Well, at least you love being married, right?" "Who said I love being married? Marriage sucks." Ah, so that's why he was telling me to get married. Thanks to Uber, I get to meet these people. When you're in my car, run your mouth as much as you want. I won't judge you. Just leave me a good tip and I'll listen to your entire life story. Instead of boring students with my life story, I tell them dumb jokes instead. Some jokes are so corny, they laugh out of pity. I think that's why they cut class to visit me. Back in the 90s when I was a student, whenever we had a sub, we cut class and went to the gym. But now it's the opposite. They cut class to visit me. I was teaching high school one day when I counted about 60 students in my class. It got so rowdy that the teacher next door stormed in, causing the class cutters to scatter like roaches. All I saw was skinny jeans and afros running out the side door. One of the funniest things I've ever seen. After slamming the door, the teacher yelled at the remaining students and told them to behave. She was furious. Then she turned to me and asked, "Didn't you notice that your class was overcrowded?" I replied, "No, I'm sorry, ma'am, I didn't notice." A few students chuckled at my response, but I kept a straight face. The teacher must have thought I was blind or couldn't count because she gave me the strangest look. Based on my teaching style and overall demeanor, administrators don't know whether I'm on the student side or the teacher side. I often feel like a kid trapped in a grown man's body. In fact, the only reason why I sub elementary is for recess. As an adult, recess is so much better now, especially when the kids play football. I'm always the quarterback, and they love it. When recess is canceled due to bad weather, I'm often angrier than the kids. I'll never forget this one time when I said something that shocked the students. I was subbing in the city one day and they announced that recess was canceled because it was too cold. I was pissed. I yelled out, "Too cold? I want to play football." I must have said it too loud because the kids looked stunned. I bet they never heard a teacher react like this over recess. Then I heard a student quietly tell her friend, "Substitute teaching seems easy." I wouldn't call subbing easy, but it's definitely random. I worked at the same bank for over a decade. The same cubicle, same route to work, same coworkers, same nasty carpet smell, same parking spot, same everything. Substitute teaching is the exact opposite. Think about it. Imagine a job where your commute changes daily. Even your lunch breaks differ from day to day. For example, Christiana High School is across the street from Dunkin' Donuts and Concord High is next to a liquor store. The teaching jobs are found online and selecting assignments are so easy, even a caveman can do it. You can select any grade level, school, or even subject. It's totally up to you. You can also schedule your week in advance, but I wouldn't recommend that. You're better off choosing assignments on a daily basis. In other words, don't commit too early. What if Tuesday's class is so exhausting you don't feel like teaching on Wednesday? Well, if you already scheduled your entire week, now you have to cancel a previously filled opening. It won't get you fired, but that's something the staffing agency tries to limit. On the other hand, if you cancel because of an emergency, they would understand. Just don't make the habit of committing too early. Schedule jobs one day at a time. Normal jobs require a phone call when you can't work, but subbing is the opposite. You let them know when you can work. You don't schedule days off, you schedule days on. You can work 5 days a week, 3 days a week, 1 day a week, whenever you want. The more often you teach, the quicker you begin cycling through all the schools in your district. I can proudly say I've developed great relationships with staff members from over 20 different schools. Chapter 4. As you listen to this audiobook, you might notice a few similarities between Uber driving and substitute teaching. Both jobs give you the freedom to work whenever you want to. Neither job requires a phone call when absent, and both can be draining. Subbing is definitely more draining, but sometimes more exciting. There's a sense of freedom knowing that I'm not responsible for these students. I'd love to teach in a college where students pay tuition, but no way I'd be a full-time teacher in America's public schools. Not only would the students piss me off, but their parents would too. I don't want to talk to them. And on top of that, the pay sucks. Our society should be ashamed of how we treat our teachers. Now, I'm not saying teachers should be millionaires, but they also shouldn't have to deliver pizza just to pay the bills. And don't bother criticizing me. I don't care what you think. I'm just a sub. It's always the people who never work with students who judge teachers the most. If you work in healthcare, engineering, or finance, you should keep quiet. I never realized how important teachers are until I started subbing. They deserve a lot more respect, especially those approaching retirement. 30 years of public school teaching is equivalent to 5 years of war. When you get a chance, research the phrase 1,000-yard stare. Then click images to see what it looks like. I've seen those looks on the faces of many teachers. One day, I saw a teacher walking down the hallway with a blank stare on his face. His shoulders were slumped and he was dragging his feet. As he passed me, I said, "Good morning." He replied, "Is it summer break yet?" This poor guy was craving summer break and it was only November. When comparing salary versus stress levels, teaching is the worst. Some students don't listen to anyone. You can be having a great day when all of a sudden one disrespectful student can piss you off. I've experienced some serious disrespect from students as young as age 10. One morning, I politely asked a 5th grader to keep her voice down, only to hear her say, "He needs to mind his fucking business." Whenever I see police officers body slamming middle school kids on the news, I totally understand. Even though you shouldn't be body slamming middle school kids on the news, but I totally understand. One time, a student was throwing pencils in my class. I told him to stop, but he cursed at me and threw a pencil right at my face. I ducked, and the pencil hit the wall behind me, causing the entire class to laugh. I was so angry, I felt like punching him in the face. I was about to yell at him, but I was way too angry to speak. I'm always mindful of something a teacher once told me. Don't speak when you're angry, unless you want to make the best speech you'll always regret. To this day, I still remember how angry I was when the class laughed at what he did. Instead of yelling at him, I told him to leave. "Get out," I said. "I ain't going nowhere, you ain't my teacher." I didn't want to argue, so I called the office. A few minutes later, the principal showed up with another teacher. After telling him exactly what happened, the principal did absolutely nothing about it. He literally turned to the class and said, "Okay, everyone, everything is fine, just settle down." Then he walked out of the room without a care in the world. Honestly, I felt like punching the principal too. Most parents have no idea how their kids act in school. You think your little angel is behaving? Give me a break. Research the school to prison pipeline when you get a chance. Then you'll see exactly what Chris Rock meant when he said, "You're not saving college money, you're saving bail money." In other words, the principal from the last paragraph did exactly what he was supposed to do. Ensuring that teenagers don't experience consequences is the blueprint to keeping prisons full. And as long as prisons are for profit, nothing will ever change. Why would they? It's a bottom line business. Someone in the background is definitely controlling everything. After removing prayer from schools, they made it illegal to physically discipline your child. Back in the 80s, I still remember my first grade teacher leading us in the "God is good, God is great" prayer. Seems like a million years ago. Try that now and parents will take you to court. Personally, I think the entire system has failed. Everyone is guilty. The politicians, the parents, the teachers, and the janitors. Just joking, I'll never blame the janitors. I might blame their dentist though. My point is, a substitute teacher doesn't stand a chance. We're only placeholders, a bookmark for the day. Whatever I say won't change anything. If you think the phrase, "this assignment will be graded," means anything to these students, then you never tried subbing. When the teacher is out, it's cell phone time. The moment students walk into my class and see me instead of their teacher, they all pull out their phones and get on Instagram. I usually give them 5 minutes to get situated, then I pass out the assignment. That's when I hear someone ask, "Do we really need to do this?" No, genius, I'm passing it out for fun. Because I'm a sub, school administrators always peek into my class just to see how I'm doing. One time a teacher walked by and told me, "You have the students working in groups. Nice, you're teaching them about teamwork." When I heard that, I laughed. There's no teamwork in here. They're all cheating off each other. Out of 30 students, maybe 5 will do their work when the teacher's absent. Then another 15 will copy off the 5. And the remaining 10 will crumble up the assignment and play basketball with the trash can. Now I know students are supposed to do their classwork, I really do. But if they're gonna throw it in the trash anyway, we might as well make a game out of it. That's when I announce, whoever makes 4 consecutive shots wins $5. I've seen students who were sound asleep immediately jump to their feet, ready to win some money. Kids aren't lazy, they just need incentives. And by incentives, I mean cash money. I felt like subbing gym class one day, so I took an assignment at Christiana High School. I love teaching there because the students are bussed in from Wilmington, West Side to be exact. They're a bit rough, but that's fine with me. Drama makes the day go by so much faster. On this particular day, none of the students changed into their gym clothes. Most of them were sitting in the bleachers listening to music or taking a nap on the dirty floor. I was shocked. Nobody wanted to play basketball? No jump roping, kickball, nothing? When I was a student, we loved when our gym teacher was absent. That meant open gym. I wanted the students to do something, so I had a crazy idea. I pulled $20 out of my pocket, then braced myself for what was about to happen. I yelled out, "Which one of you lazy bums want to win some money?" Man, they leaped off those bleachers and surrounded me. I said, the first person to make 2 consecutive half-court shots wins. You hear me? I assume y'all know what consecutive means. What happened next was amazing. Everybody joined the competition. I saw some of the most optimistic-looking jump shots fly through the air and hit absolutely nothing. It was easy to tell which kids played sports and which kids couldn't even spell the word sports. At first, I thought someone would eventually win, but after seeing all those air balls, I thought otherwise. But one thing was certain, it finally looked like gym class. Everyone was running around and the bleachers were completely empty. This was no easy task. 2 consecutive shots from half court? Some students made 1 shot, but nobody could make the second. First of all, they were shooting from over 40 feet away. Secondly, even if they made 1 shot, what's the chances that they would make the second? Slowly but surely, students started to quit. One by one, they grabbed their phones and returned to the bleachers. I vividly remember how exhausted they looked. I began feeling bad for some reason. As more students quit, I started hoping one of them would win. Well, my wish came true. Right before the bell rang, a shot went in. The shooter was a boy wearing red jeans and a gold chain. After he made the first shot, his eyes lit up. He threw off his book bag and prepared for the next attempt. That's when I yelled, "Good shot! You do know what consecutive means, right?" He laughed, then took another shot. The ball sailed through the air in slow motion, just like in the movies. Swish, the shot went in. The class went crazy. You would have thought they all won. I kept my promise and gave him $20. Damn, there goes my lunch. I never got his name, but from that day forward, he always shook my hand whenever he saw me. Friends always ask me if I like subbing gym. Although it's exciting, it's not as fun as you would think. For one, the noise could drive you crazy. The sound echoes everywhere. And 2, you're rarely sitting down, so by the end of the day, you'll be exhausted and deaf. But one thing is certain, gym teachers don't pass out packets. I call substitute teaching the packet game. When students ask me my name, I tell them, I'm Packet Man. The teacher's instructions usually read as follows: take attendance and pass out the packets. Batman fights crime, Superman saves lives, and Packet Man distributes packets. But an hour later, I change from Packet Man to janitor when I sweep up all the packets off the floor. When I was a student, substitute teachers would put on a movie, but with smartphones everywhere, movies are a waste of time. One day, after turning off the lights and starting a movie, a student shouted, "Sir, can you please stop the movie but leave the lights off?" When I asked him why, he said, "Nobody's watching this." I found that to be so funny. Another time, I remember subbing a high school class where all 30 students were on the phone. They weren't talking on the phone, but they were using the apps. Instagram, Facebook, Grindr, who knows. Nobody was socializing. The room was so quiet you could hear the clock ticking. I'll never forget looking at the clock and thinking, I can actually hear the clock ticking, which is extremely rare for a subs class. The only exception is when students are taking a test, but this wasn't the case. Everyone was on the phone, everyone was quiet, and that was weird. Usually, students will talk to each other for a few minutes and then get on the phone. Or they'll wrestle and play cards for a few minutes and then get on the phone. But this was different. I was in a room full of zombies staring into cyberspace. It was such a crazy sight to see. At Starbucks, it's a common sight to see because nobody knows each other. But in high school, it's not a common thing to see, especially when all these students are doing drugs and having sex with each other. And by the way, everyone in high school is having sex and doing drugs. Maybe I'm old, maybe my perspective is off, but the conversations I'm overhearing are crazy. One morning at William Penn, this grown-ass 14-year-old girl was trying to sell me edibles. And just for the record, I didn't buy any. Sometimes I wonder if smartphones should even be allowed in school. If they're not gonna ban them, why not use them to the teacher's benefit? They should teach through the phone. I'm sure the students wouldn't mind. After all, movies aren't working, textbooks definitely aren't working, and packets don't stand a chance. Chapter 5. One morning in 2006, I was scrolling through teaching assignments when I saw an opening for intervention specialist. I wanted to try something new, so I said, what the heck, I'll try it out. For the first time, I was entering the world of in-school suspension. For whatever reason, I was late that day. When I entered the room, I'll never forget this. Another sub jumped out of his chair and said, "Oh, thank God, I'm being replaced. Good luck." Then he shook my hand and quickly left. He was a sloppy, overweight-looking dude, so I knew the kids were giving him a hard time. I looked around the room and noticed 8 students. Not exactly Harvard material, but still my favorites. After the first sub left, I closed the door and they all looked at me. All males, a bunch of middle school boys in detention. 13-year-old boys waiting to make fun of your bald head, your dirty sneakers, your ashy elbows, anything they can think of. Now that I think about it, most comedians probably lived in detention. After introducing myself, I looked around the room and saw a big sign that said, "No talking in this room." "What's that sign mean?" I shouted. A student responded, "It means that we're not supposed to be talking." To which I replied, "If you're not supposed to be talking, then why do I hear your voice, youngin'?" They all laughed, and I immediately knew they liked me. Within 5 minutes, we were talking about video games and sports. Then an argument over basketball started. One student said Kobe Bryant was the best basketball player ever. I responded, "Ever heard of Michael Jordan? Look at your feet, youngin', you're wearing his shoes." Another student said that Larry Bird was the best, to which I replied, "If it wasn't for YouTube, you would have never heard of Larry Bird, youngin'. You don't know nothing about Larry Bird." They all laughed. In fact, everything I said made them laugh. No doubt in my mind they were confused at my quote-unquote detention rules. One particular student named Cody wasn't interacting with anyone. All the kids were black except for him, so maybe that's why he kept to himself. I don't know, but I do know this. Because he wasn't interacting with me, I didn't interact with him. Remember my 2 rules from chapter 2? Don't make eye contact and don't speak unless spoken to. At some point during detention, there was a knock on the door and a teacher walked in holding a stack of papers. Apparently, Cody got kicked out of class so early within the period, he never got his assignment. After introducing herself to me, she approached him and slammed the papers on his desk. Although she meant well, she had absolutely no connection with Cody. She immediately started yelling at him. "Here's your work, Cody, finish it." "Get away from me," Cody answered. The teacher then said it was going to be graded, but Cody didn't care. "You're not my mom, get out of here." "Are you serious, Cody? You're failing." "I don't care, lady, get out my face." The other students were laughing so hard. She ordered them to be quiet, but that was useless. I mean, the most useless thing I've ever seen. I also wanted to laugh, but that would have been so wrong. For one, it was obvious to me that she cared about her job, but also, I didn't know the history between her and Cody. Maybe this was an ongoing battle. Maybe she gave him a ton of second chances already. Or maybe Cody was her nephew, who knows? The staffing agency always tells us to remember this rule. When you enter a school, you're only a guest. In other words, mind your business. In hindsight, I'm glad I didn't interrupt their conversation. I wanted to say something to help the teacher reach Cody, but then again, it might have backfired. Cody would have yelled at me. Unfortunately for both of them, the teacher's words fell on deaf ears. Some might say the most deaf ears in public school history. All of a sudden, Cody snapped. "Get the hell away from me," he shouted. His voice was so deep that it startled me for a second. The room erupted in laughter and the teacher quickly left. The kids even threw stuff at her as she slammed the door. Such a terrible scene. These students were truly the outcasts of the school. After she left, I scolded the students, but they took it as a compliment for some reason. Maybe because the scolding came from me, I don't know. Cody looked at me and said, "You should teach here more often, sir. You're cool." When I asked him why he thought I was cool, he said, and I quote, "Because you're easy to talk to and you know how to relate to my generation." Man, that really touched my heart. When a student you've never met says something like that, it makes you realize just how much these kids look up to you. After thanking him for the compliment, I immediately told him to do 25 push-ups for disrespecting his teacher. Without hesitation, Cody was on the ground doing push-ups and sit-ups. I was impressed. I was impressed not because of his strength, but I was impressed because he wanted to impress me, a stranger he never met before. Maybe he was right. Maybe I do know how to connect to his generation. Here's the most interesting part of the story. Within 20 minutes, Cody finished his assignment. I'll never forget Cody. He's probably in jail now, or maybe he went to college, who knows? But something tells me he's gonna make it big or crash and burn. No middle ground for a guy like that. As I drove home that day, I kept thinking about those kids in detention. Because of them, I learned something. I learned that I'm very good at reaching unreachable students. It's my God-given gift. I always get along with the crazy ones. Whatever character trait that is, it also translates to Uber. Maybe that's why it doesn't bother me when passengers drink alcohol or snort cocaine in my back seat. Obviously, I don't want them to do it, but they're very sneaky. By the time I realize what they're doing, they're finished doing it. With that being said, to all my future passengers who want to get high in my back seat, I only have one rule. Don't die in my car. Chapter 6. I'm finally convinced that listening to other people's problems is a legitimate form of therapy. Next time someone is bending your ear off at the sports bar, just realize this. You'll feel a whole lot better when you leave their presence. This is why I never interrupt my passengers. I've heard plenty of dramatic stories, and I'm grateful for every single one of them. I've heard about spouses, jobs, and even prison. After a while, though, some passengers apologize for talking so much. To which I reply, no, don't apologize. Tell me everything. She slashed your tires? And then what happened? Your boss did what? I want to know everything. By the way, what's your social security number again? Some passengers are unapologetically talkative. They have a lot to say and need to say it now. I remember this one cartoon character I picked up in Center City, Philadelphia. This guy was nuts. He needs more than his own chapter. I could write a book on this guy. He was an older man in his 60s. As he entered my car, he was already shouting. For the first minute or so, he was yelling something about socialism. I thought he was on the phone, so I didn't say anything. Surely he wasn't talking to me, but boy was I wrong. He was talking directly to me. The moment I realized he wasn't on the phone, which was about 2 minutes into the ride, I said, "Wait, are you talking to me?" He aggressively answered, "Yes, who else would I be talking to?" I wanted to laugh my ass off. The fact that I was unintentionally ignoring him was hilarious. I didn't know what he was saying though. He was trying to explain something about a trade agreement between Singapore and Venezuela. To me, his Uber driver of all people. I immediately followed the 2 rules mentioned in Chapter 2. I made sure not to speak unless he addressed me first, and I definitely didn't make eye contact with this renegade. Once he calmed down, he asked me to take him to the bank. Funny thing is, I picked him up from a bank, but he got kicked out. According to him, Wells Fargo wouldn't give him his money. At first he was very patient with them, but eventually he started shouting at everyone. The argument got so aggressive, the manager told him to leave. I'm paraphrasing, but the manager said something like, "Sir, your account is frozen. You can't withdraw any money right now. This isn't socialism." That's when he went berserk. He looked at me through the mirror and said, "Do you know what I told her? Do you know what I said? I told her Venezuela left us. They were after us and they left us, not the other way around. We didn't leave them. Venezuela left us." Oh my gosh, I was never so confused in my life. Venezuela left who? And even if they did leave, what's Wells Fargo have to do with it? I was laughing so hard on the inside. Although I had no idea what he was talking about, he meant every word he said. What's funny is, he didn't ease into the conversation at all. He literally got in my car yelling something about Venezuela. That's why I thought he was on the phone. Then he turned his attention towards the government. "College is a scam. Books should not cost $500, he shouted. I agreed with him, but I didn't interrupt him. This was not a two-way conversation. When I dropped him off, he handed me an extra $5 and I thanked him. "Not a problem," he said. "I got plenty of money. Plus, you had to listen to all of my shit." What a character. I'll never forget him. By the way, if listening to people's shit is profitable, I should be rich. I am a great listener, especially when I'm wearing earbuds. When subbing elementary, younger students tell me stuff they should probably keep to themselves. One student told me his brother can't stay out of jail. Another student told me his dad never visits him. Then he asked me if my dad ever visits me. You become more compassionate when kids tell you their problems. And it's the same thing on the roads. When passengers start venting, show a little compassion. But not too much compassion, or else you might have blood coming out of your ears. Honestly, I don't mind listening to other people's problems, especially if I'm getting paid for it. Other people's stories can potentially cheer you up, especially hospital patients. I've given so many rides to cancer patients, stroke victims, gunshot victims, people who can barely walk, people who need help getting in and out of my car. When you interact with people who are terminally ill, you immediately become grateful for your own problems. I also love taking people to court. Court stories make me feel a whole lot better about my life, child support especially. Custody battles are always a hot topic with my passengers. One guy told me his ex-girlfriend blocked him from going to their son's high school graduation. Then she threw their daughter a birthday party without telling him. Another passenger told me his ex-wife put a restraining order on him. Then she drove to his house and called the police from his driveway. According to him, he spent 3 nights in jail for no reason. I was driving through the grimiest part of Camden one day when I picked up a guy who told me everything. His ex-wife took their kids and moved them into her new boyfriend's house. The new boyfriend is a known drug dealer, and now the kids were witnessing all types of craziness. He's currently fighting for custody, but his ex-wife is hindering the process by slandering his name. Another guy told me all about his female problems. My goodness, he had multiple ex-wives, a girlfriend, and someone else might have been pregnant. I don't remember everything he said, but I'll never forget when he told me his age. We were born in the same year, but he looked 30 years older than me. White hair, wrinkles, bad posture. He could have passed for a senior citizen. Even though I felt sorry for him, all of his problems seemed self-inflicted. The man was stressed out. Listen, the stories I hear could make a Stephen King movie. They say there's 3 sides to every story, but I'm only getting one side. Who knows if these guys are telling the truth? Maybe they caused the problems and the women are innocent. I don't know. And I really don't care. Just keep the stories coming, fellas. The way I see it, passengers trust me. They know they'll never see me again, so they tell me everything. I feel like a shrink on wheels, mobile psychology at your service. I can't speak for every Uber driver out there, but passengers treat me with the utmost respect. When working in corporate, you'll never be treated with the utmost respect. And even if you get some respect, it's fake. Corporate employees are just as important as the dust in the conference room. Here one day, gone the next. I remember interviewing with BlackRock and the manager said, "Hey, thanks for your time. We might get back to you, we might not, but listen, I have 100 other resumes to go through." It's like the movie Donnie Brasco when Lefty said, "You're only a spoke on the wheel." Picture that for a second, a spoke on the wheel. You're not even the wheel, so never mind the person pedaling the bike. Working in corporate for over a decade taught me how small I was within the grand scheme of things. I've seen people get laid off, then told to leave right away. They couldn't say goodbye or get their belongings. Instead, a security guard throws all your stuff in a box and tells you to get lost. In my opinion, corporate is only good for comfort. As long as layoffs aren't coming, it's a stable job with a 401k, 2-hour lunch breaks, and plenty of air conditioning. But if you're looking to be appreciated, corporate might not be for you. By the way, shout out to the HVAC technicians who maintain corporate buildings. Every summer, they freeze us to death. During heat waves, I love talking to people who work outside. Whenever they mention the heat, I say, "You guys are hot? Imagine how I feel. I work at the bank and I'm freezing." With a confused look, they ask, "Excuse me, what'd you say?" "The air conditioner, it's too cold." Corporate managers are well aware of how easily replaceable you are. Because of this, always keep your resume updated. Corporations don't care about their workers. Some managers may not even speak to you in corporate. I remember working for a director who always ignored me. Whenever I greeted him in the hallway, he would look away and keep walking. But when he needed something from me, he had no problem running his mouth. Driving and substitute teaching are nothing like corporate. I'm exaggerating a bit, but when you enter a school as a sub, they roll out the red carpet. When I say that substitute teachers get plenty of respect, I'm referring to how staff members treat you, not the students. Teachers appreciate your presence and they're glad you chose their school for the day. But with students, it's hit or miss. I always look forward to visiting schools and especially look forward to speaking with the staff. "Hi, are you a substitute? Thanks for coming in. My name is Cindy. I'm the counselor. Her name is Janet. She's our principal. Mike is our security guard. Our staff lounge is over there. Thanks for coming in. You're going to love it here. Thanks again." They were thanking me so much, I thought they were joking. In corporate, you might earn respect from your peers, but rarely from management. If you arrive early and stay late, it'll probably go unnoticed. I remember one time coming in on a Saturday just to get a head start on Monday's work. Not only did I do my work, but I also completed a bunch of stuff for 2 coworkers. When Monday came around, they were very appreciative and told the manager what I did. I assumed the manager would have thanked me as well, but he didn't. Instead, he said, "I wouldn't have done that. Don't help them out." Due to a teaching shortage, whenever I go to a school, I'll always receive a warm welcome. Is it because I'm a man? Is it because the female teachers find me attractive? Or maybe it's because the teachers are so worn out from dealing with the same students that a substitute teacher's presence is the only variety they experience. It's just a guess, so I could be wrong, but either way, I always appreciate the warm welcomes. Surprisingly, Uber passengers are just as grateful. Other than a few instances, most riders jump in and say, "Hey man, thanks for the ride, I appreciate you." Similar experiences from 2 completely different jobs. Uber driving and subbing are fun, but neither job is perfect. Your mind can easily play tricks on you when you least expect it. On a Saturday afternoon, you might ask yourself, "What am I doing in this empty parking lot? It's been over an hour since my last passenger. I could be doing so many other things on a Saturday. How did I become an Uber driver?" The same is true when subbing. Imagine sitting in a 10th grade class bored to death with kids yelling all around you. You might think, "How did I end up here? Why are these kids so loud? And why is that kid throwing stuff at me? I could break his neck if I wanted to. Wait, how did I become a substitute teacher?" Although there's nothing wrong with subbing, it's probably more enjoyable if you're retired. Subbing isn't a career path that people actually choose. Most people in education become full-time teachers or administrators. I'll summarize it like this. If substitute teaching is your main source of income, you might as well become a zookeeper. You already have the experience. Teaching is stressful, and you might think it's worse than Uber, but the highways are just as tough. If you're on the road for any length of time, you're guaranteed to witness a ton of reckless driving. By the way, do you know how fast people drive at 4 a.m.? 100 miles per hour. Next time you're wide awake and can't go back to sleep, drive around your city at 4 a.m. and you'll see exactly what I mean. One morning around 5:30 a.m., something crazy and completely unpredictable happened. After dropping off a few passengers, I pulled over to check my phone for teaching assignments. I saw an opening for agricultural science, so I began reading through the teacher's notes. In order to accept this specific assignment, I had to confirm that I was comfortable working with animals. At first, I thought the word animals was code word for the students, but I later found out that the classroom had actual animals, bunny rabbits and dogs to be exact. The sub's job was to make sure the students fed them. Seemed easy to me. I accepted the assignment around 6 a.m., then drove to Wawa for coffee. As I got on 4th Street, I saw a guy parallel parking his car about 50 feet in front of me. As I drove in his direction, I noticed that he and his dog were exiting the car. The dog was on a leash at this point, so everything was fine. But what happened next was the most idiotic thing that I've ever seen. The guy unleashed his dog at the exact moment I drove past him. Even though my windows were up, I still heard the owner scream, "No!" But it was too late. The dog ran directly under my tire, causing me to lose control and swerve into the next lane. All I heard was bang as I ran over the dog. I immediately made a U-turn and drove back to the scene, and what I saw next was absolutely heartbreaking. The owner was losing his mind. He was a black man wearing military fatigues and a heavy coat. It was freezing outside, and I still remember seeing his breath in the cold air. He was running up and down the streets in total desperation, with both hands clutching his head. His cries were so loud that bedroom lights started turning on, and all of his neighbors were staring at us. This happened so early in the morning that it startled everyone on the block. So there I was, parked in the middle of the street with my hazard lights flashing. The owner was running in circles while the dog was shaking on the concrete. I didn't see any blood, but the dog's tongue was hanging out, and I'm sure his skeleton was crushed. The dog was approaching his last breath, and I had no idea what to say. I felt absolutely terrible in that moment. About a minute later, the dog finally stopped moving and I saw life exit his body, which was a very disturbing thing to see. But something even more disturbing happened right before he died. The moment he stopped shaking, he rolled over in the complete opposite direction, looked me in the eyes, then froze. That bothered me for weeks. At this point, the owner was still screaming, oh my God, my baby." I had to say something, so I quietly mumbled, "I'm sorry, bro." I thought he was going to attack me or curse me out at the very least, but instead, he completely ignored me. He picked up his dog and threw him in the back seat of his car. "I got you, baby. Stay alive, baby. Everything's going to be all right." He slammed the gas, his tires screeched, and smoke was everywhere. 10 seconds later, he was completely out of sight. I felt so bad for him because his dog was most definitely dead, and I don't think he even realized it. Afterwards, I pulled over and thought, what just happened? One moment, I was driving to work. The next moment, I completely ruined someone's life. Although I felt slightly responsible, I kept asking myself, why did he unleash his dog near moving traffic? And why let your dog exit the car from the street-facing door as opposed to the sidewalk? None of it made any sense to me. But the more I blamed him, the worse I felt. I spent the next few minutes pinching myself to make sure I wasn't dreaming. I was so disturbed, I couldn't even finish my coffee, and I love coffee. After getting myself together, I got back on the road and drove to the school. What really blew my mind was the teaching assignment that day just happened to be animal related. How's that possible? When I got to class, I remember feeling guilty when I saw the teacher's animals. There was no doubt in my mind they knew I did something wrong. The dogs wouldn't make any eye contact with me. They even acted strange when I tried to feed them. Since the dogs were ignoring me, I tried speaking to the rabbit. I said, "Hey Bugsy, listen, I'm sorry, but it wasn't my fault. The owner unleashed his dog." The rabbit looked at me, gave me a little nod, then walked away. I called a friend of mine that morning and told him everything. He's owned multiple dogs in his lifetime, so he knew what it felt like to lose one. He applauded me for returning to the scene and apologizing to the owner. Some people will hit a dog, then drive off like they hit a squirrel. I'm not saying it's good to kill squirrels, but it happens. I accidentally killed a few squirrels in my lifetime, but this was the only time I ever killed a dog. Chapter 7. I rarely drive Uber past 11 p.m. Not because I'm scared, but because I'm tired of dealing with drunks. Almost every ride that I ever accepted after 11 p.m. was either bar or club related. And what do bars and clubs have in common? Drama and alcohol. I don't mind picking up a drunk loner, but driving a group of drunks ain't fun. Even worse, imagine getting a ride at midnight only to find out you're picking up 3 women who just got kicked out of a bar. That won't be fun. You'll be driving to their destination so fast that you might become colorblind. "I'm sorry, officer, the red light looked green to me." Remember when I told you to only speak when spoken to? That rule applies to sober people. Don't speak to drunks at all. Whatever I say always pisses them off. One hot, humid, muggy Saturday night, I picked up a guy from the Delaware casino who was drunk and belligerent. Normally I would be intimidated, but he was traveling alone, so I wasn't worried. Plus, not only do I get along with public school delinquents, I also get along with crazy people. It's weird, over the years I always got along with people who couldn't get along with other people. Whether it's at work, the boxing gym, or the bars, it never seems to fail. I remember getting along with a coworker at a summer job in 2005. One day my supervisor pulled me aside and said, "You know he's crazy, right?" I said, "No, I didn't know that." Same thing happened at a boxing gym. By the way, boxing gyms attract all types of characters, from people in corporate trying to get in shape to people fresh out of prison trying to start a boxing career. When I think back, the guys that I trained with were anything but normal. At one boxing gym in Philly, there was an employee who punched a heavy bag violently. He always looked angry. I started speaking to him one day and we developed a decent friendship. It wasn't until weeks later that I noticed something strange. I was the only person who talked to him. Nobody said a word to this guy. Then my buddy Tyreek pulled me aside one day and said, "You know he's insane, right?" I said, "Really?" He said, "Yeah, you didn't know that?" I said, "No, I had no idea." This never entered my mind until recently when I was sitting on a park bench one day. I was staring at the clouds, minding my business, when I asked myself, do I get along with crazy people because I'm crazy? Anyway, back to the casino. I couldn't find my passenger because it was dark outside and the entrance was crowded. Other than his first name, I didn't know anything about him. I could have easily canceled the ride, but I had nothing else to do that night. All of a sudden, I saw a guy wearing a sleeveless t-shirt stumbling through the crowd. He was an older white guy with messy hair, dirty clothes, and a beer belly looking just like Homer Simpson. He walked up to my car, confirmed my license plate, then jumped in reeking of alcohol and cigarettes. He was a mess. I'm not perfect, so I can't judge anyone. I never met this guy, so I had no right to criticize him. But with that said, he looked like he crawled out of a dumpster. Nonetheless, I showed him the utmost respect because you never know what people are going through in life. After he slammed my door, he said, "Take me to E-Town." I knew exactly where E-Town was, but just for fun, I said, "Where?" And he yelled, "Ellesmere! Take me to Ellesmere! The casino took all my money." I responded, "Aye, aye, Captain. I know Ellesmere very well. In fact, that's where I get my hair cut." And I said that while rubbing my bald head, and he chuckled a bit. Then he lit a cigarette and asked, "Hey man, can I smoke in your car? The casino took all my money, man." When I do casino runs, I can sense when someone wins money. Winners are usually calm and relaxed, but this guy was the opposite of relaxed. So I told him that normally I don't let people smoke in my car, but since he was having a rough night, he could smoke. "Thanks, man." He was growling his words at this point. During the ride, he told me all about his family. He and his wife were happily married and living in peace, but everything changed when her parents moved in. According to him, they started criticizing his spending habits even though he's the only source of income in the house. "Her parents don't make any money," he said, "but they're telling me how to spend mine? Oh, hell no. If I want to go to the casino, then that's what I'm gonna do. That's my money. That's my house. I'll do whatever the hell I want to do." I nodded my head in complete agreement. Then he started rambling about some other stuff. He told me he makes $72 an hour working for a piping company in downtown Philly. I guess that's true, who knows? Everybody brags to the Uber driver. Passengers tell me everything. How much money they make, how much sex they have, the drugs they use, and especially the drugs they sell. If I was a pretty white girl with blonde hair, I doubt they would tell me so much, but a bald-headed black man gets to hear everything, I guess. For some strange reason, passengers can't wait to tell me their criminal history. We continued down the highway and Homer Simpson just kept talking. "I love gambling," he said, "but you need a strategy. First, you gotta put it on black. Then, on red. Then put the same thing on odd. And that's the flop, know what I mean? It's odd or even. Dealer's choice. You can break, but that's 00. But if you fold, that's snake eyes on the river and blah, 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 blah." This guy was talking Japanese. I could barely hear what he was saying because the windows were down. Plus, he was drunk. He sounded nauseous too. So I made sure not to change lanes too quickly or else he might vomit. He even fell asleep a few times, but every time he dozed off, I jerked the steering wheel to wake his ass up. Then I blamed it on a squirrel. "Oh shoot, my bad, almost hit a squirrel, sir." As we approached Ellesmere, he pointed to a liquor store and shouted, "There, right there." I didn't know what he was talking about, so I said, "Huh? What?" "Pull over, drop me right there." I looked at where he was pointing and basically he wanted more beer. That's the last thing he needed, but you know what? The customer is always right. I asked if he wanted me to wait for him, but he shouted, "No, I'll walk home from here. You've been helpful enough." I glanced at the GPS and noticed we were still a few miles from his house. That's a long walk at 11 p.m., especially when your eyes are barely open. But then again, he was pissy drunk at this point, so his legs were probably numb. Two things I won't forget. He accidentally left his fancy lighter in my car, and he also gave me a $5 tip. And another thing, from the time he got in my car to the end of the trip, he couldn't get his seatbelt on. I was watching him the whole time through the mirror but didn't say a word. He was so uncoordinated that he couldn't get the belt handle to click. When the ride finally ended, the last thing he said to me was, "Oh, by the way, your seatbelt sucks." Then he slammed the door. Bam! What a character. God bless him. I hope he's still alive. Now, if it wasn't for Uber, how would I meet this guy? Chapter 8. Most students are respectful when you speak to them individually, but something weird happens when they form groups. Those same respectful students turn crazy. Your day will be a lot easier if you make friends with the crazy kids. If you can't beat them, join them. Whenever class starts, I quickly look for cursing and fighting. A student who's bold enough to be cursing and fighting in the beginning of class needs to be my friend. Once I find them, I name them Alpha. My goal is to keep Alpha busy, taking attendance, passing out papers, running errands, anything. If Alpha wants a hall pass, the answer is yes. Whatever Alpha wants, just say yes. If Alpha kicks a trash can, no problem. If he rips posters off the wall, that's fine. Don't make enemies with Alpha. Once he or she becomes your ally, they become your guard dog, so to speak. I've seen Alphas kick students out of my class. Get out! Get back to your class! They don't belong here, Mr. T. Since Alphas are usually feared, no one challenges them, which is good for me. By the way, the student who yells out, "The teacher's absent, we have a sub," isn't usually Alpha. They're just excited to see a sub. They'll behave. On the contrary, true Alphas don't care about a sub. Why would they get excited for a sub when they do whatever they want around their regular teachers? Finding Alpha isn't always easy. A student who misbehaves in the beginning of class might suddenly change for the better. But the opposite is also true. A student who begins polite can suddenly become rude. Some students make the determination easy. One morning, I was subbing a middle school class in Wilmington when I got a phone call from the principal. She asked if I was willing to switch rooms with another substitute who was having a hard time. I agreed, and about 5 minutes later, an Indian lady with a very thick accent walked into my room and said, "Thank you for switching with me. The students in my classroom are very disrespectful. I don't know what to do. Can you help me, please? Can we switch?" I felt like giving that poor woman a hug. She was so grateful that I switched with her. So I gathered my belongings and walked to the other side of the school. When I entered her class, I saw a student standing on the teacher's desk, literally standing on the desk. I thought my presence would make him get off the desk, but nope, my presence meant nothing to this kid. That's Alpha. Make friends with him ASAP. We had a full-blown conversation about wrestling, and he was standing on the desk the entire time. You gotta remember, in their eyes, I'm just a sub. My favorite answer is yes. Can I go to the bathroom? Yes. Can we work in the hallway? Yes. Can I visit another teacher? Yes. Can I go to my locker? Yes. Can I go to the bathroom again? Yes. Can I use the computer? Yes. Can I sit in the teacher's chair? Yes. Excuse me, sir, can I? Yes. Yes, you can. Say it quickly and say it quietly. Who cares how many bathroom breaks they take? Who cares if they roam the hallway? My pay won't change. Nagging students is a losing battle, so don't waste your energy. Most Uber drivers don't say yes. If a passenger asks to make a pit stop, many drivers say no. How do I know this? Because whenever someone asks me to make a pit stop and I say yes, they always say, "Thanks, the other drivers never stop." Or they'll say, "Thanks, my last driver stopped, but he left me stranded at a gas station." I take it on a case-by-case basis, but generally, I help out whenever I can. Can you turn up the air conditioner? Yes. Can you turn up the volume? Yes. I have a train to catch. Can you speed up? Yes. Buckle up. One time, I drove a guy to Chester in the middle of a heat wave. He asked if I could stop at his bank long enough for him to cash his check, then drive him home. Know what I said? Yes. He was very appreciative, especially since I saved him a 10-block walk in 95-degree weather. But I didn't even get a tip. Not $1, nothing. Whenever I take someone to the airport, I always ask if they're running late. Everyone's usually on time, but every now and then someone's in a rush. One guy needed a 30-mile ride to the Comcast Tower in downtown Philly. When he got in my car, his exact words were, "The crazier you drive, the better your tip." I immediately started weaving through traffic. No matter how fast I drove though, it wasn't fast enough for him. He was a classic backseat driver. "Why are you using the turn signal?" he said. "Never use the turn signal. Just cut him off." I laughed thinking he was joking, but he was dead serious. "Cut them off and keep it moving," he kept saying. "It's better to ask for forgiveness than ask for permission. Don't worry about signaling." Don't worry about signaling? Who is this maniac? I picked him up from a mansion in Chadds Ford, so I knew he had money. I never asked passengers what they do for a living. Like, never. But I had to ask this guy. So I politely asked what kind of work he did. and he told me he was a pilot. He told me all about the job, then he told me all about his crazy friends. Once a year they get together and drag race airplanes, bungee jump, and mountain climb in the wilderness. I knew this guy was crazy. I wanted to know if any of his friends ever died during these high-risk activities, so against my better judgment, I asked that exact question. He looked at me, stopped talking, then looked out the window. About 10 seconds later, he mumbled, "Yes, some have died." The ride quickly became uncomfortable, so I stopped talking and turned up the radio. I broke rule number 2 and had another 20 minutes of awkward silence to pay for it. But I don't think he was that offended because he gave me a $10 tip. I thought it would be more, but I'll take 10. I have 2 driving modes, normal mode and Terminator mode, which I never use unless the situation calls for it. One time, a guy needed a ride from Malvern to the Wilmington train station. Based on GPS, we were 45 minutes away, but his train was leaving in 30 minutes. I drove so fast that I think I scared him. I'll never forget, I got him there on time and didn't even get a tip. Although an Uber driver's first impression is important, it's not nearly as important as a teacher's first impression. Nothing is worse than arguing with a room full of teenagers. Been there, done that. By the way, always address an entire group of talkative students. Don't single them out. If you target only one of them, you might hear, "I'm not the only one talking, so mind your business before I slap your bald head." Now you accidentally created a comedian. If a group of kids are misbehaving and you kick only one of them out, the remaining students get worse. Students love to trigger substitute teachers, so if they notice you're getting mad, they'll keep pushing your buttons. For that reason alone, I never kick students out. That's why you need alpha. Where's my guard dog when I need him? Your introduction is very important because it sets the tone for the rest of the period. The problem is, getting a class to be quiet is exhausting for a substitute teacher. In my early days, I wouldn't speak unless the class was completely quiet. I'd be yelling, "Everyone be quiet, settle down. Hey you, stop throwing stuff. Settle down everyone, be quiet." That rarely worked, so I started using a different strategy. Instead of waiting for silence, I begin my introduction during the commotion. Whenever I do this, something interesting always happens. The students begin to govern themselves. You might hear, "Shut up, the teacher's trying to talk, y'all need to shut up." Then it quickly gets quiet. I make multiple requests for silence and nobody wants to listen to me, but only one request from a student just happens to work. They must be more scared of each other than me. Another effective strategy is something I call the delayed introduction. It's easier than the previous strategy and it's perfect for substitute teachers. It goes like this. Only address the entire class after you privately address individual students. In other words, just walk around the room and ask dumb questions. For example, "Excuse me, miss, what class is this? What time does the bell ring? Yo, bro, what day is this? What's your teacher's name?" Or my personal favorite, "Yo, my man, what's the name of this school again?" You should see their faces after that question. If a student has balloons, wish them a happy birthday and walk away. Never linger. If I see an injured girl using crutches, I'll quietly ask, "Hey, did you break your foot on your boyfriend's ass?" Speaking to students individually creates a small connection with them, so when it's time for your full introduction, it goes so much smoother. Unfortunately though, a smooth class is sometimes a boring class. Teaching is weird. Some days speed by and others take forever. It's such a good feeling when I hear the final bell ringing at 2 p.m. Getting off work at 2 feels like I'm getting away with a crime. Sometimes I think, wait, it's only 2 p.m.? It's still Monday? What do I do now? That's right, Uber. When you initially join Uber, you'll learn so many new things. You'll discover new parts of the city, meet new people, and you also might become a better driver. Teaching is also educational. You'll learn new slang, new handshakes, and you'll definitely learn the latest iPhone apps. And here's something else I learned about students. They love making fun of each other. Growing up, all we did was roast each other. But nowadays, kids take it to the next level. Their jokes are hilarious. One day, I was minding my business when a student told me I had a big shiny forehead. So I made fun of his dry lips. He ridiculed my clothes. I ridiculed his yellow teeth. Then he said substitute teachers can't afford a car, so we hitchhike everywhere. I responded that King Tut called me from Egypt and wants his gold teeth back. It got so entertaining that another student yelled, "Yo, he's boosting me, the teacher's boosting me." Another student agreed, "Yeah, he's boosting me too, he's hilarious." I was boosting them? Never heard of that one. Years ago, when someone made us laugh, we would say, "He got me bagging up." Bagging up? Adults back then probably had no idea what we were talking about. Okay, what are you bagging up? What, groceries? One day in gym class, the students wanted to play a basketball game called Knockout. I asked if Knockout was the same as a game called Thunder and Lightning, but they had no idea. I later found out it's the same exact game. If you switch schools as often as possible, you'll get to see a broad range of teenage behavior. From my vantage point, student interactions today are slightly different from the 90s. Back when I was in school, there was always some form of racial tension in the air. No matter how innocent it seems now, plenty of arguments started because of racial jokes. But now, I don't see it. And before you call me naive, I'm not saying it doesn't happen, I just haven't seen it. When I was in 6th grade back in 1992, I got in a fight at recess with a white kid named Brent. He and I were friends, but sometimes friends fight. Right when the fight began, a bunch of kids surrounded us and started chanting, a fight, a black and a white, a fight, a black and a white." Funny thing is, the fight had nothing to do with race. What happened was, I accidentally stepped on his sneakers and he got mad and punched me. I've been to the roughest inner city schools, the middle of the road schools, and the suburban advanced placement ones. No matter where I go, students seem to respect each other's differences. Of course they make fun of each other in jest, but nothing too malicious. Shout out to Mr. Edwards, my 9th grade science teacher from Trinidad, who once said, "How come my class looks like a rainbow? You guys need to mix." Back when I was in high school, the cafeteria looked like a rainbow because everyone sat with their own race. I'm exaggerating a bit, but that's how it was. But now, you'll see students eating together from every background. I'm not saying that every table is mixed, but it's definitely more mixed in the 90s. One day during lunch duty, I spoke to a teacher about this. He was in his late 50s and taught in public schools for over 20 years. He told me about a paradigm that only this current generation can relate to. He said, "When today's kids think of the president, do you know who they think of? A black man. That's considered normal for them. Obama is their only reference." His analysis was so interesting that I pondered it for days. I was subbing high school one day when something funny happened. Oh my gosh, I'll never forget this. A group of students were discussing the N-word and trying to determine who can say it and who can't. Can a white person say it to another white person? Can a white person say it if it's in a song? Stuff like that. At one point, they even told a classmate to say it. "Say the N-word, bro, you could say it." But the kid, who was white, didn't want to say it. "I'm not saying that word," he kept repeating. What made it even more funny was the fact that some of the other white kids were instigating him as well. "Say it, bro, you got a pass. They said you could say it." They were all friends and there was nothing malicious about the conversation, so I didn't say anything. Remember, I'm just a sub. As they continued the conversation though, I noticed that the one white kid was getting uncomfortable. "I don't want to say the N-word," he kept saying. "I'm not allowed." But the black kids kept messing with him. "Yes, you can, bro. You are allowed. Anyone can say it. Obama's president." That made them laugh even harder. Like I said, they all seemed to be having a good time, so again, I kept my mouth shut. Then I heard a student say, "Let's ask the teacher. Let's see what he says." That's when I thought, oh man, I don't want to get involved in this. They don't pay me for this. So I reluctantly walked to their table and noticed them all smiling. At the table were 2 black boys, 2 white boys, 1 black girl, and 1 white girl. The black girl spoke first. "Hey teacher, can my friend right here say the N-word?" Before I even answered, the kid blurted out, "I don't want to say it. Why would I want to say it?" And again, they all laughed. I tried walking away, but the black girl wouldn't let me. "You didn't answer the question. Can he say it?" So I said, sure, why not? They all laughed. "I told you, bro, even the teacher said you can say it." Obviously I was joking and everyone knew that, but for some reason the black girl thought I was serious. She yelled at me, "What are you talking about? He can't say it." I said, "No, why not?" "Why not? Because he's white." That's when I ended the discussion in the funniest way possible. I said, "Of course he can say the N-word. Doesn't N stand for knowledge?" Man, it took about 5 seconds for them to realize how ridiculous that statement was. "Yo, this teacher is crazy." They were all laughing, even the black girl. Then I walked back to my desk with my hands in the air and said, my bad, I can't spell. I'm just an Uber driver." And that made them laugh even more. Although I haven't seen any racial issues in school, today's students will fight over something we knew nothing about in the 90s: online bullying. You won't believe how many Instagram-provoked arguments I hear. Female students are especially sensitive when their friends don't like their photos. You might hear something like, "Don't act like you didn't see my post, you better like my shit." As comical as that sounds, that's the peer pressure of today, I guess. From my experience, high school students are very easy to talk to. Most of them have part-time jobs or play sports, so submitting to authority is normal for them. Either a coach is telling them to run or a supervisor is telling them to take out the trash. Elementary kids are different though. Their behavior is completely unpredictable. Some of them are innocent, some of them are respectful, some of them are rude, and some of them just won't stop screaming. When high school teachers are absent, students get on their phones. When elementary teachers are absent, some students act like they just want a trip to Great Adventure. But there's something you can do about that. If you're losing control of a 4th grade class, just ask the following question: who plays Fortnite? Then shut up and let them talk. They'll surround you like a pack of vultures, telling you every detail of the game. They also love playing GTA. Now, I'm not trying to parent your kids, but 4th graders playing GTA is probably not a good idea. By the way, when I was 33 years old, it took me less than a month to beat GTA 5. No lie, I was playing 6 hours a day. Think about this. If I was playing that often as a working adult, just imagine how often kids were playing it. GTA 5 might be the most addicting video game ever created. Every kid in the country knows about it. Ask any student what their favorite weapon is in GTA, and you'll immediately get their respect. You'll be considered the best substitute teacher ever. Then, you'll get an earful of useless information. I used this gun, I used that gun, I beat this mission, I got this car, I got that gun. Oh God, I should have never asked. Full-time teachers can't always have these conversations. They actually teach. But not me. I'm just a placeholder. My job is to make sure nobody breaks anything. As a principal once told me, just make sure they don't kill each other. Female students will get on your good side if you mention Snapchat or TikTok. They often take photos of me, with permission and sometimes without, then use the filter to make me look like an alien. And since I don't act my age, they really enjoy it. I can only imagine what administrators think when they peek into my class. Sometimes I'm in the back of the room gossiping with the girls while the boys are playing Uno on the teacher's desk. Now that must be a funny sight to see. So again, if your class is getting out of control and you don't know what to do, just talk about Instagram, Fortnite, or Snapchat. Then, brace yourself for a talkathon. Chapter 9. As weird as this might sound, Uber driving reminds me of GTA. GTA is a video game where you complete missions like robbing banks, stealing cars, or driving around delivering drugs. But when it comes to Uber, I'm driving around delivering people who probably have drugs in their pocket. The very first GTA came out in the mid-90s, and it might have been the first game that used a GPS. It was unprecedented. The game's map was so big that the city seemed endless. You could explode buildings, complete missions, or just roam the city with a machine gun. It's just like Uber, but instead of violent missions, I drive people around the city while listening to 80s music. Even though the Uber app isn't perfect, it self-corrects almost immediately. I'm truly grateful that I can make money using such an app. Also, there's a sense of freedom knowing that I can log off whenever I want to. That's why I love driving in Philly. So much stuff to do in Philly. Sometimes I take a midday break at Dave & Buster's, then take a nice long walk in Penn's Landing. Or you can find me in Center City, nickel and diming it. I go from 30th and Walnut to 5th and Chestnut to 47th and Walnut, then back to Chestnut. It's basically GTA, but without the machine guns. Uber has definitely changed my attitude towards driving. Being on the road for so long has made me a much more compassionate driver. In the past, I got angry when the car in front of me stopped for no reason, but now I'm the one holding up traffic. Cars are beeping at me. Whenever I see cab drivers running red lights and making U-turns in the middle of the street, I finally understand. They're just trying to make a living. Miraculously, Uber has taken the competitive nature of driving completely out of my system. Well, maybe not completely, but close to it. Sometimes I drive aggressive, but when I'm off the clock, I'm in no hurry. So next time you're on the highway speeding like a maniac, look to your right and you'll see me cruising in the slow lane sipping a beer or coffee. Rushing rarely works. I never rush to pick up passengers. I don't even care about getting lost anymore. In fact, the best part about getting lost is the stuff you find along the way. Next time you're lost, pay attention to your surroundings. You might discover a brand new restaurant. A while ago, someone once told me, some of the best treasures in life are found in darkness. So, don't worry about getting lost, unless it's 2 a.m. and you're in Kensington. Some people get stressed out when they're lost, but not me. When I'm lost, I start exploring the intricacies of the city, the back streets, the crack houses, the whorehouses, and restaurants and churches and other stuff like that. Only 3 months worth of Uber driving taught me more about Philadelphia than the previous 20 years of visiting, especially when it comes to bars. I was never a daytime drinker until I started driving. I know that doesn't sound right, but it is what it is. I don't even like that phrase, but in this case, it is what it is. Daytime drinking doesn't mean I'm getting trashed though. Just a few beers at the barcade and I'm good to go. Speaking of barcade, playing Mortal Kombat with a slight buzz is very unpredictable. You might start cursing at the screen. I also love taking breaks at Planet Fitness. I've been to over 50 gyms in the tri-state and I have nothing but good things to say about Planet Fitness. I should be their mascot. I'll be like Jared from Subway, but before he went to prison. Planet Fitness might be the most important part of my day. After driving for a few hours, you would think that taking a nap would be the best way to recharge, but the opposite is true. Napping makes me sluggish. So instead, I'll GPS the nearest Planet Fitness for a quick workout. Then, after taking a cold shower, I'm back on the road wide awake for second shift. Sometimes I dribble a basketball between rides. Even though I stopped playing ball many years ago, you can find me shooting free throws in an empty park all by myself. Honestly, those are some of my favorite Uber breaks. Speaking of breaks, don't take one too close to a passenger's house or else you might look like a creep. Then you wonder why you get bad ratings and no tip. Me? I get plenty of tips. Passengers love me because I rarely speak. I'm attached to the car like a robot. When I teach, I'm a ghost. When I drive, I'm a robot. I'm programmed to say hello and goodbye. I try to talk to strangers as much as possible. From what I gathered, most people want to join Uber, especially bartenders. They always ask me the same questions. Does it destroy your car? Do you get good tips? Is it exhausting? I usually say yes to everything. What's the best conversation starter? Maybe it's the weather, maybe it's the news, but nowadays nothing beats mentioning Uber. I'll walk into a bar and say, "Hey, can I get a beer? I just finished driving Uber all day." Afterwards, close your mouth and prepare to listen because you're going to get a lot of questions. "You drive Uber? That's awesome. My cousin drives. I want to drive too, but I think my car's too old. How much money do you make? Do you get a lot of drunk people?" That's when I remove my earbuds and say, "Oh, I'm sorry. Were you talking to me? You talking to me, man?" Uber passengers and bartenders are the perfect audience for my jokes. For one, we don't know each other, so their criticism won't bother me. Also, I can practice the same joke over and over again on different people. Students, on the other hand, don't care for my jokes, but they sure love my card tricks. Before anyone enters my class, I'll hide a few cards in random places throughout the room. I have a specific card trick where I tell students to pick any card, then place it back in the deck without me looking. Then, after shuffling a few times, I easily find their card. But I take it to the next level. Remember those cards I hid throughout the room? I use them to supplement my tricks. Students completely freak out when I find their card on the other side of the room in a dictionary. Obviously, I know the card is in the dictionary, or under the keyboard, or in my jacket pocket, because I'm the one who put them there. But nobody saw me put them there, and that's what gives them the creeps. One day, I showed a card trick to a girl sitting next to me. After I found her card in the most random place imaginable, she covered her mouth and ran away from me. She was shook. Finding the card is usually fun. Everyone enjoys it, they laugh, and then they want to see the trick again. But this girl didn't want to see it again, and probably regretted it seeing it the first time. The fact that she ran away from me was concerning. Her and I were talking the entire period. Her desk was next to mine, so we talked about a lot of stuff, like college, her field hockey practices, stuff like that. But once I found her card, she ran away from me like I was a demon. She must have told her classmates what happened because a group of students quickly surrounded me and said, "Do it again, do it again, do it again." So I did the card trick again and the class went crazy. At first they weren't impressed when I found the card within the deck, but when I found that same card over 20 feet away, scotch taped to the back of the American flag, they went nuts. It got so loud that the teacher next door walked in with a big smile on her face. "Wow, you must be the cool sub," she said. She asked if I was a magician, so I told her that I'm half magician, half Uber driver, and half substitute teacher. She laughed and then wanted to see the trick. I agreed only because I still had a few more cards hidden throughout the room. But once those cards are used up, I can't do the trick anymore. By the way, when the bell rings to switch periods, teachers are supposed to stand in the hallway to watch the kids, but not me. I'm busy hiding cards. I gotta be fast too, otherwise my tricks will get exposed. Many times students walked in and saw me hiding cards under the trash can. They probably thought I was a new janitor. So with the teacher standing right next to me, I started the trick. When I finished, I found her card, as expected, in the middle of the deck. She enjoyed it, but I could tell she wasn't impressed. So I took it to the next level. I asked, "Hey, do you see that yellow book over there? Can you grab it for me?" Her whole demeanor changed. She looked at me and said, "No way." She was too scared to get the book. The students were laughing, saying, "Get the book, go get the book." And again, she said, "No way," which made the kids laugh even harder. Because she was acting like a chicken, one of the students ran to the shelf and grabbed the book. I looked her right in the eye and said, "Your card is on page 263. She turned the page and almost fainted. The kids were going nuts. She quietly stared at the card in pure disbelief. "You know black magic?" "I knew it. Black magic is real. Oh my God, he knows black magic." She was hysterical. As shaken up as she was, I was more concerned that she thought I was a black magician, pun intended. At first, I didn't want to show her how I did the trick, but I also didn't want her telling the school district that a demon Uber driver was scaring people. So after giving it some thought, I showed everybody exactly how I did the trick. Boy, did I regret that. The teacher immediately said, "Oh my God, how did I fall for that? That's the dumbest trick ever." It wasn't dumb 2 minutes ago. To all magicians and substitute teachers out there, never expose your tricks. The audience will lose respect for you, then laugh in your face. Remember, the best part of a card trick is the mystery. Chapter 10. The following chapter is a bit more serious. For the first time while teaching, I was going to learn a lesson on false accusations. It wasn't anything too crazy, but false nonetheless. It happened when I was teaching an 8th grade class in the inner city. I actually went to this school in the early 90s, and I loved everything about it as a kid. But teaching here is a mess. The class was crowded and extremely loud. Picture the loudest class you can imagine, then double it. Most of the students were either blasting music or running around the room acting like idiots. One particular student near the window just kept yelling. He was wearing a Chicago Bulls t-shirt and he looked exactly like the rapper Bobby Shmurda. For the purpose of this story, I'll refer to him as Bobby. He was sitting on the windowsill looking at his phone with 3 of his friends huddled around him. Every so often, they reacted to whatever they were watching. His friends reacted quietly, but Bobby just couldn't control himself. He screamed at the top of his lungs, "Yo, that's crazy! Ah!" The class was already way too loud, so imagine how loud he had to be for me to hear him across the room. I told him to keep his voice down, but he barely acknowledged me. He looked at me for a split second, then looked back at his phone. A minute later, there was another outburst, so I gave him a second warning. A minute later, another outburst. A third warning. A minute later, another outburst, a fourth warning. A minute later, well, you get the point. Pretty soon, even his classmates were telling him to shut up. To make a long story slightly shorter, every minute on the minute for the next 40 minutes, I gave Bobby a warning. 40 warnings. Imagine that. By the way, I rarely kick students out because that could backfire and make everything worse. And if this specific class got any worse, I would have pulled the fire alarm and went home. Although nothing really surprises me anymore, Bobby's lack of respect was shocking. Somewhere between the 35th and 40th warning, I had to do something. So I walked over to him and his friends and said, "Excuse me, if you scream one more time, I'm kicking you out." His reaction puzzled me. It was the same reaction from the previous warnings. He looked at me, then quickly looked back at his phone. What the hell, man? At least say something. Call me stupid or tell me to shut up. I don't care. But Bobby completely ignored me. I guess I was a ghost after all. Initially, I thought he was a special needs student. Many kids with ADHD act exactly like he was acting that day, ignoring authority and yelling out loud. But later on, I found out there was nothing wrong with him. He was just rude. After giving him a final warning, I walked to my desk assuming everything would be fine. But before I even sat down, I heard another outburst from Bobby. That's when I lost it. I yelled, "You, get out!" The entire class got quiet. Bobby said, "Who, me?" I said, "Oh, you can speak?" He said, "Who?" I said, "You." He said, "Me?" I said, "Get out." He said, "Why?" I said, "Get out." He said, "What did I do?" I said, "Get out now." He said, "Why? I ain't do nothing." At this point, the other kids were laughing at him while he desperately begged me to stay. It was music to my ears. Keep laughing, class. Show no mercy. He eventually stood up from his desk, but he didn't leave right away. He kept arguing with me, telling me he did nothing wrong. "Why you kicking me out? I ain't do nothing. Why you playing me, dog?" I said, "I'm not your dog. Now go to the office." Once again, he kept telling me he did nothing wrong. I could totally understand if he was begging to stay while apologizing, but he was literally asking me what he did wrong. When he finally left, I slammed the door so hard that the entire room shook. Now, normally, I don't care enough to give speeches, but this was a teachable moment. I walked to the front of the class and said, "Can I have your attention, please? Everyone listen up. Did everyone see what just happened? You see what happens when you disrespect authority? If you want to be disrespectful, that's your choice, but understand this, there will be consequences. And when those consequences come, you got to deal with it. If you're tough enough to disrespect people, be tough enough to accept the consequences. But on the other hand, don't be disrespectful, then cry like a newborn baby when the consequences come." Contrary to what I expected, everyone laughed. I wasn't even trying to be funny. The newborn baby part must have done it because they were hollering, "Bobby is a baby. He was crying like a newborn baby." Not only did they like my speech, but they also took my side against Bobby. A few of them said, "You had to kick him out. He wasn't listening." To which I replied, "Thank you. I'm glad you noticed that. Thanks for having my back." Bobby was sent to U-turn. It's called U-turn because students eventually make a U-turn and come back to class. They go to a little room where a disciplinarian monitors them, and after promising to behave, they make a U-turn right back to class. I hate U-turn, by the way. If I kick you out, I don't want to see your face for the rest of the day. But that's not how it works, unfortunately. What happened next was ridiculous. The phone rang and it was the U-turn teacher. He called to make sure I kicked out the right student. I told him that yes, it was the right student, and he said, the reason why I'm asking is because this particular student is adamantly denying any wrongdoing. In fact, he's saying the substitute, you, were very rude to him." I thought he was joking, so I asked, what exactly did Bobby say? And he replied verbatim, "Well, he's saying that he was quietly doing his work and you kicked him out for no reason." No reason. Bobby didn't know this, but the U-turn teacher and I already knew each other. We weren't exactly friends, but we spoke every time I subbed at his school. We talked about everything, especially the challenges involved when dealing with black kids. He was an older man who had a ton of life experience. He was a pastor, a marriage counselor, and he preached in prisons. I bet he's seen every mistake and heard every excuse in the book. And the funny thing is, I doubt he needs a paycheck. He doesn't need this job. He just wants to be a positive influence for the next generation. After he told me what Bobby said, I gathered my thoughts and told him what really happened. I even made sure to tell him that I rarely kick students out of class, so the fact that Bobby got kicked out should let him know how bad he must have been acting. When I finished talking, the teacher exhaled a deep breath. After about 10 seconds of silence, the first words out of his mouth were, "How many warnings does it take for our students to shut up?" When he said the words, "our students," I knew exactly what he meant. He was truly embarrassed that I experienced this at his school, and he was especially mad at Bobby for lying. Then I asked if Bobby was a special needs student. He quickly answered, "No, he's not special needs. Nothing is wrong with him. He knows exactly what he's doing. This kid always gets in trouble." At the end of our conversation, he thanked me for subbing at his school and hoped that this incident wouldn't prevent me from returning. "This school is tough," he said. "We're always looking for black teachers, so please come back whenever you can." I hung up the phone and class continued as normal. About 20 minutes later, Bobby returned. He walked directly to his desk and didn't say a word. I was curious to see if his behavior would change, and it most certainly did. He was staring out the window in complete silence. When his friends asked what happened, I heard him say that he was kicked off the basketball team. Apparently, this was his 4th U-turn strike, so no more school activities. His friends couldn't believe it. I don't even think Bobby believed it. He looked like a kid who missed Christmas, and I felt like the Grinch. I was extremely pleased with the U-turn teacher that day. Kicking Bobby off the team was probably the best thing that could have happened to him. If students aren't held accountable for bad decisions, how else will they learn? Way too often, they only get a slap on the wrist without any consequences. But not this time. They hit Bobby where it hurts. By the look on his face, he'll never forget this day. Now that I think about it, Bobby should be glad that he learned this lesson so early in life. Like the saying goes, if you're gonna fail in life, do it as early as possible. Here's another phrase that might defy logic. The key to success is consistent failure. Trust me, when Bobby goes to high school, he'll be way more respectful. And he definitely won't be telling lies on his teacher. And later in life, when he's an adult, he'll respect authority. It's your parents, then it's your teachers, then police officers. Those are the 3 levels of authority. Regarding police officers, a friend of mine who worked in education and is also the son of a police officer and the cousin of a police inspector told me the following. Whenever a student blatantly disrespects teachers, that student is already disrespecting his parents. Then later in life, when an adult blatantly disrespects police officers, he most likely disrespected all of his teachers throughout grade school. This is why it's so easy to see which students are eventually going to jail. Defying authority doesn't happen overnight. It's a gradual process. So the bell rang and I shook Bobby's hand as he left the room. He was cool with me at this point. Actually, he had no reason not to be cool with me. I treated him with respect the entire period. After school that day, the teacher's words continued to echo in my head. "He said you were rude. He said you kicked him out for no reason. He did nothing wrong." Nothing wrong? As I drove home, I started thinking about police shootings, specifically stories of people getting shot by cops for no reason. I couldn't help but hear a mother get on TV and say, "They shot him for no reason. He did nothing wrong. He was an angel." Nothing wrong? An angel? Angels are from heaven. These aren't angels. I remember a story in North Philly where a teenager robbed an Uber driver and shot him in his neck. During the scuffle though, the driver pulled his gun out and killed the kid. Afterwards, bystanders were interviewed and one of them said, "That driver did not have to kill that poor kid. That was so wrong." I'm sorry, but when you're robbing people at gunpoint, you're no longer a kid, and you're definitely not an angel. These are the types of stories that make police officers so trigger happy. These streets are dangerous, and I know for a fact I couldn't be a cop, because if I was, I'd be in jail for murder. Listen, I'm not trying to start a fight because I know there's dirty cops out there. All I'm doing is telling you my thoughts as I drove home that day. Bobby was disturbing everyone, and I gave him so many second chances, but instead of telling the truth, he lied on me like a coward. Who knows what could have happened if they believed him? Nonetheless, life is the best teacher. You're either going to learn now or learn later, but everyone eventually learns. And judging by the look on his face, little Bobby Schmurder will be a better man because of this. Honestly, I'm not mad at Bobby at all, not even a little bit. In fact, I wish him the best that life has to offer. I have nothing but love and respect for every student that I've ever taught. But like they say, it takes one to know one. Back in the day, we acted crazy too. I remember a maniac from Eastside named Brian who's always quick to explode. He didn't go 0 to 100 real quick, he went 90 to 100. Every morning he woke up on 90. He wasn't scared of anything. One time, he was taking a nap and a classmate sitting next to me punched him in his back. Brian immediately jumped up ready for action. The kid got so scared that he lied on me and said I punched him. Brian went crazy. He grabbed me, put his elbow against my throat, and pushed me against the wall. Brian was my friend, so I wondered why he thought I punched him. I kept telling him, "It wasn't me, man, it wasn't me. Why would I punch you, bro?" He finally calmed down and asked who did it, so I pointed to my punk-ass classmate. And instead of apologizing to me, Brian said, "You're lucky it wasn't you. I was gonna fuck you up." I'm only mentioning this to show you how volatile he was. By the way, I vividly remember this day because I never got in fights during high school, so obviously this would stand out to me. On this specific day, our teacher was absent and the sub was sitting in his chair watching the entire scuffle and didn't even say a word. Earlier, I said Brian and I were friends, but we were more like school friends. We never hung out on the weekends, but we played basketball and debated sports every single day. Man, those were some fun days. Our Bulls-Knicks debates were so intense that Stephen A. Smith would have been proud of us. Everything on SportsCenter was debated. When Jordan came out of retirement and scored 55 on the Knicks, that's all we talked about. I remember everything about that specific class, even the girls who hated us for arguing so much, but we didn't care. Regarding the newspaper, I want to explain how cool it was to go to high school before smartphones were invented. In homeroom, the sports section was always a big thing. Most of the time we were civilized, but every now and then we would fight over the paper and rip it in half. I miss those days because people were more social back then. Just think back to your high school homeroom. Even though some students were half asleep, the majority of us were talking to each other. Nowadays, homerooms don't even exist. Most schools start with first period. And the schools that do have homerooms are usually silent. Everyone is on their phone in their own little world. But not in the 90s. We would huddle around the newspaper to see how many points Iverson scored or how many rebounds Rodman had. Man, those are some great memories that I'll never forget. I always had a daydreaming problem in high school. The only remedy was to draw as much as possible. I drew on everything, textbooks, desks, and even on the walls. Remember the bathroom stalls with all the writing on the doors? For the record, some of it was mine. In between classes, while the cool kids were smoking cigarettes and rolling dice, I was putting up hieroglyphics. I also had a weird addiction of drawing on newspapers. After reading the sports section, I always enhanced the athletes' photos, like drawing a fake mustache on Brett Favre or a cigar hanging out of Emmitt Smith's mouth. What's funny about that is, the sports page was such a hot item, it would exchange hands throughout the day. Then, 6 hours later at dismissal, I would ask a classmate to borrow his sports page, only to see Emmitt's cigar. I would laugh to myself and say, "Wait, this is my paper." That's why I didn't get mad when someone snatched my paper. There was always a chance it would find its way back to me. One day in high school, we watched a military documentary which totally captured my imagination. When the bell rang, I went to my next class completely mesmerized. For some reason, I wanted to draw ASAP. I found a magic marker and drew the most elaborate picture I ever drew in my life. I drew tanks, missiles, and soldiers. Fighter jets were shooting at people while grenades blew up buildings. It was pretty much a snapshot image of what a battlefield would look like. The only problem was I drew this picture on the desk. At the end of the period, a few classmates asked, "Yo, did you draw that?" They loved the picture so much that it got the teacher's attention. She approached us to see what all the commotion was about, only to find one of her desks completely covered in ink. She was not happy about that. She looked at me and said, "Detention." I had to stay after school that day and clean all of her desks, but when I finished cleaning everything, I'll never forget what she said. "That picture you drew was amazing." Okay, back to the story. Now that you know who Brian is, let me tell you what he did. He brought a stink bomb to school and showed it to me during class. I never seen one before, so I asked if I could hold it, but he wouldn't let me. It was a little glass capsule filled with yellow fluid. I kept asking when he was going to use it, but he wouldn't say. I was begging him to break it during lunch when everyone was eating. I wanted to see mayhem. Looking back, Brian probably ignored everything I said. I was a bookworm compared to him. He was straight from the hood, East Side Wilmington to be exact, and he might have been the most fearless kid I knew. I also remember he didn't graduate with us, but instead transferred to another school. What's funny about that is, the school that he transferred to over 20 years ago is one of the roughest schools that I sub at now. It actually makes perfect sense that he transferred there. In fact, just last year, that school is where I saw my first, and so far only, student get arrested. Handcuffs and everything. So the bell rang, I grabbed my book bag and followed Brian into the crowded hallway. I wasn't the only one who knew what he was about to do. A group of us were all waiting in excitement. This was going to be the first time I ever witnessed a stink bomb prank. Throughout high school, I remember a few stink bombs going off, but in each one of them, I only saw the aftermath. I was either coughing or holding my nose, but I never saw the actual prank in action. But this was different. Brian was on center stage and we had front row seats. Good thing there were no camera phones back then. Brian turned his arm underhand like a softball pitcher and threw the capsule into the crowded hallway. But it didn't go as planned. He threw it against the ceiling for some reason and it bounced off the light and fell into the hoodie portion of a girl's sweater. Although it didn't break, we almost died laughing as he carefully retrieved it without the girl noticing. After finally grabbing it, he yelled, "Man, fuck this shit," and smashed it on the ground, immediately causing the entire hallway to stink. It was the worst thing I've ever smelled. Brian didn't come to school for another 2 weeks. In that power tech class, we acted like fools whenever the teacher was absent. This is why 25 years later, I laugh to myself when students misbehave in my class. Substitute teachers have no authority, so I expect the class to go crazy. Whenever the technology teachers were absent, toolboxes were off limits. One day, our sub wasn't paying attention, so we grabbed some tools and started working on the engines. I guess I was bored that day because I found a box cutter and started cutting stuff. Parked in the back of the room was an old, beat-up 1970s hatchback which was donated to the school for our projects. For reasons that I can't explain, I climbed into the car, pulled out the box cutter, and tore the seats wide open. I must have been mad about something because I spent over 10 minutes completely destroying everything. A few moments later, my buddy Larry stared at me in disbelief. "Dude, what are you doing?" he shouted. My exact answer, which I still remember to this day, was, "I don't know, man." The substitute teacher was looking at me too. Although he violated rule number 1 by making eye contact, he definitely didn't break rule number 2. He didn't say a single word to me as I swung that razor blade like OJ. I was a skinny teenager with a knife, receding hairline, and a crusty beard. If I was the sub, I wouldn't have said anything either. This is an embarrassing story to tell, but if I'm going to tell on today's students, then it's only fair that I tell on myself. When I look back at that moment, I ask myself, why did I destroy those seats? Who cares if the car was trash? Why did I do it? Well, only one answer comes to mind: because we had a sub. When I was in 11th grade, we had a long-term sub who covered for our English teacher. Because there were expensive computers in his class, we were told to meet in another room until our teacher returned. One day, someone brought in a CD player and began blasting Tupac's new album. A girl named Rashida was looking at the album cover and kept telling everyone how handsome he was. "Tupac is so handsome," she kept saying. The other girls agreed. When I heard this, I approached them and said, "Hey, guess what? Some people say I look like Tupac." They paused, looked at me, looked at each other, and then they laughed. I don't know why I remember that, but here's something else I remember. This specific room was being renovated and the contractors left construction material everywhere. And for some strange reason, a few of the students were trying to destroy the drywall. One student was throwing a baseball at the wall. Anyone with common sense should know better, but like I said, we had a sub. I remember wearing brand new Timberland boots that day, which made me feel extra special. Maybe that's what gave me the confidence to approach those girls. I don't know. But one thing I'm certain of, brand new Timberlands have strong heels. I still remember what the sub was wearing that day back in '97. Khaki pants and a green checkered shirt. He was sitting next to the window reading the newspaper and minding his business. No matter how rowdy the class got, he didn't seem to care. I didn't realize this at the time, but the sub was following my 2 rules from chapter 2. And he was also a ghost. Refer to chapter 3 for the ghost. So my classmate tossed me the baseball, pointed to the wall and said, "Your turn." I didn't feel like throwing it, but as Ice Cube said in the movie Friday, peer pressure is a motherfucker. So there I was, lightly throwing a baseball at the wall. I guess I wasn't throwing hard enough because my buddy yelled at me. "Man, you throw like a bitch," he said. "Oh yeah? Watch this." I stood up, ran down the aisle, and karate kicked a hole in the wall. Timberlands. Oh shoot, what did I do? What was I thinking? Oh no, my dad is gonna kill me. I immediately got scared and thought I was getting suspended. My buddy fell to the ground laughing, but I felt terrible. The sub saw it too, but he didn't even react. Did he tell my teacher? Did he call the office? Did he kick me out? Nope, none of the above. He looked at me, smiled, then looked out the window. I will never ever forget that. I can say without a doubt that the substitute teacher was watching the clock and waiting to get the hell out of there. He didn't care about that wall the same way I don't care when students throw books out the window. Obviously, I tell them not to throw books out the window, but if they ignore me, what can I do? Excuse me, put the book down and have a seat. Nah, you ain't my teacher. Put the book down. Oh yeah? Watch this. Then the class erupts in laughter as the student opens the window and throws a book into the parking lot. Again, when I ask myself why I kicked that wall, I can only find one answer. Because we had a sub. Some people say the devil made me do it, but I say the sub made me do it. From this day forward, I'm blaming all of my problems on substitute teachers. We had another sub named Mr. Ray Hall who taught our 8th grade gym class. We were so immature that we called him Mr. Gay Hall. We would say, "Hey, good morning, Mr. Ray Hall." Then we'd laugh in his face. Surprisingly, he never reacted. Why were we so disrespectful? One day, a few students began taunting him first thing in the morning. I wasn't the ringleader, but I definitely participated. We began chanting, "Mr. Gay Hall, Mr. Gay Hall, Mr. Gay Hall." He looked at us, turned around, and walked away. I always wonder why he never kicked us out, or at least yelled at us. And another thing, I guess we felt safe because we were in school, but we would have never insulted him like that in the streets. We were skinny little teenagers and he was a grown-ass man. He could have beat us all up at the same time. I remember another sub whose first name was Richard. One day, my friend whispered in my ear and said, "Yo, the sub's first name is Richard. Call him Dick." So, that's exactly what I did. I said, "Excuse me, sir, can I call you Mr. Dick from now on?" My classmates laughed, but the sub turned away and completely ignored me. What a corny question. I was such a loser back then. My point for sharing these stories is to prove that students from every generation misbehave, especially when the teacher is absent. Some students are helpful and never cause trouble. Some students go slightly overboard, and others go full-blown crazy and get expelled. Subbing is a very interesting job that every adult should try. You'll get to see a completely different side of education. But don't worry, you're not responsible for these kids. If students throw stink bombs or kick holes in the wall, don't even worry about it. When the final bell rings, walk to your car, log on Uber, and start making money. But don't drive off too quickly because your very first pickup might be that crazy-ass kid you kicked out of class. Now that's gonna be an interesting ride. Chapter 11. Be very careful what you say around Uber passengers and students. You can talk politics here and there, but don't be sarcastic and don't say anything sexual. Adult sarcasm doesn't work on students. It only makes you look stupid. Students aren't on your intellectual level, so sarcastic jokes don't make any sense to them. I've made plenty of slick comments over the years, and instead of getting laughs, I got puzzled looks. They were probably thinking, "My dad says that same stupid thing." Also, make sure not to roast a student too hard. There's a time and place for comedy wars, but keep it playful. I was teaching high school one day when a girl walked in late. She was wearing a pink mini skirt and she was showing so much skin, she almost looked naked. She was obviously a female, right? Well, stay tuned. The following is a lesson on pronouns. Not the pronouns you learned in 4th grade, but the pronouns that are getting people fired. As she approached me to sign in, everyone was staring at her. She handed me her late pass and I said, "Good morning, young lady." She calmly responded, "I'm a boy." I chuckled and quickly asked, "Huh? What?" Again, she calmly responded, "I'm a boy." As she was signing in, I looked at her late pass and the name said Crystal, a female name. I can totally understand if someone dresses like the opposite sex because of a gender identity issue, but in this case, I knew for a fact she wasn't a boy. There was nothing masculine about her. She looked like a stripper. So, one more time I politely asked, "Did you say you were a boy?" Man, she did not like that question. At 7:30 a.m. in front of a quiet class, she yelled, "I said I'm a boy!" Everyone froze. Nobody said a word. Even the students who were asleep woke up. Now, I wasn't trying to ridicule this poor girl, but I just couldn't help it. The comedian side of me automatically came out and I said, okay, I'm sorry. Okay, you're a boy. I get it. I'm sorry. I get it. I feel you. I get it. Because I'm a lizard and people always confuse me for a human. Know what I mean? Oh my gosh, that joke came out of nowhere. The class reacted immediately. Yo, what did the teacher say? He's a confused lizard? Yo, he's boosting me. They couldn't believe what they just heard. The only person who didn't find it funny though was Crystal. You should have seen her face. She was pissed. She stared at me like Mike Tyson. I remember thinking to myself, she looks like somebody I know. Then I quickly remembered, oh shoot, that's the Mike Tyson face. A little later, I tried talking to her, attempting to get on her good side, but she wasn't having it. So I went back to my desk and monitored the class. About 30 minutes later, I knew she was still mad at me for one specific reason. Whenever students have candy, they always share with me. If a student opens a bag of chips, Starburst, bubble gum, they always give me some. Probably because I'm indirectly allowing them to eat in class. Well, after making my lizard joke, I saw Crystal eating a bag of Skittles. I slowly walked by her desk and asked, "Hey, can I get some?" She quickly shouted, "No!" And she turned around and completely ignored me. I learned an important lesson that day. If you're a teacher, don't crack jokes that are even slightly offensive. Although her classmates laughed at everything I said, Crystal never cracked a smile. What adults find funny, students find corny. But I noticed something else. Students may laugh when you're not trying to be funny. Countless times I said something that made everyone laugh and I never found out why. It's actually a strange feeling. The more I ask what's so funny, the more they laugh. Substitute teachers must always be mindful of physical contact. Keep your distance at all times. No hugs and very few handshakes. The only exception is when high school football players approach me for bro hugs, but other than that, no hugs at all. If a 5th grader asks me to zip up her coat during recess, I won't do it. I'll tell her classmate to do it. I'm not reaching down there. If a 4th grader asks me to tie his shoes, as innocent as that sounds, I probably wouldn't do it. Classmates are always happy to help, so let them help. Although we try to control every aspect of our lives, some things happen whether we like it or not. One day, I was teaching a 7th grade class and there were 3 noisy girls sitting in the back of the room. They weren't rude, but their conversation was definitely shocking. Based on what I overheard, it was obvious to me that all 3 of them were sexually active. And I guess they like older men because one by one they kept coming to my desk to tell me how handsome I was. Like I said, these girls were active. Later that afternoon, I was assigned to bus duty. Bus duty is pretty easy. Just break up any fights and make sure everyone gets on the bus. While talking to one of the bus drivers, I saw those 3 girls from my class. They were far away from me, but they were walking in my direction. As they got closer, one of them asked if I was coming back to their school tomorrow. But before I could even respond, all 3 of them simultaneously hugged me. Simultaneously means at the same exact time. And it wasn't a normal hug either. 2 of them pressed their cheeks against mine, and one of them put their hand near my groin. I quickly wiggled out of it, and they ran away laughing. These were 7th graders, 13 years old. I looked at the bus driver and asked, "Did you see that? Did you see what just happened?" And he responded, "Yup, be careful, man. These young girls will test you." The hug wasn't even the worst part. When I looked around to see who else witnessed it, everyone was looking at me. Those female teachers were staring at me like I killed someone. They looked disgusted. I wanted to tell those teachers, "Hey, listen, you saw what happened. I didn't hug anyone. They hugged me. Matter of fact, I'm only here for the card tricks." But I didn't say anything at all. Instead, I decided to never come back to that school. It's not like I need to teach there. There's over 30 other schools I can choose from. Also, here's something else to think about. Those girls didn't look 13 at all. They had body parts that will make a grown woman jealous. As a man, you can't have female students hugging you. No exceptions. If I had a daughter and I also taught at her school, I wouldn't even hug her. I'll tell her to wait till we get home. Whenever I see hugs approaching, I'll always extend my arm. Handshakes only. Some female students are bold with their sexual advances. One day, I was teaching high school science when two girls approached the front of the room where I was standing. At first, I didn't notice them because they blended in with the other students walking around. Then, one of them intentionally dropped her car keys at my feet while the other secretly recorded with her phone. When she bent over to grab her keys, she made sure that her butt lightly rubbed across my leg. I immediately took a step back, slightly shocked, but they calmly returned to their seats as if nothing happened. Instead of correcting them or saying anything at all, I chose to play it safe by acting oblivious to what just happened. Then, one of the girls said to the other, "Tell him that we're 18. At another high school, I remember a female student who was all over me. She volunteered to pass out papers, take attendance, and do anything else she could think of just to keep a conversation going. She even asked if I had a wife and kids. This girl was 20 years younger than me, and she was talking to me like we were the same age. I told her to sit down, but she ignored me and kept returning to my desk. Then, out of nowhere, she quietly whispered, "I'm 18 years old, by the way." As the bus driver said, you gotta be careful around these students. But guess what? Students aren't the only ones you gotta watch out for. Teachers will test you too. Many times I'd be speaking to married teachers who would intentionally stand so close to me that their breast would lean on my shoulder. I would nonchalantly take a step back to create space, only to find them take another step forward. More common than that, some teachers rub my arms during conversations. Now I'm not criticizing them, but I'm reminded of Paul Mooney when he said, "Teachers nowadays are freaks. They don't want to apple anymore. They want to fuck." Now these teachers I'm mentioning, are they attractive? Sure, some of them, but it could also be a setup. I'm a very paranoid person. If something is too good to be true, like a married coworker throwing herself at me within the first 2 minutes of meeting her, then I become a little suspicious. Unless I have a signed permission slip from her husband, I'm not interested. Plus, something else to think about. People talk. You don't want your staffing agency finding out that a horny substitute is on the loose. By the way, can you imagine if I was rubbing on a female teacher? I'd be fired. Where's all this female attention when I'm at the bar? Something else I had to learn was students record their teachers. I love catching them because they get so ashamed. You could see it in their faces. Other times, students ask me to say something which makes no sense. A strange phrase, for example. When I ask them what it means, they won't tell me. They just want me to say it. Say it, just say it. And that's when I notice someone secretly recording me in the distance. Students want the sub to say something crazy so they can post it online. What a tricky world we live in. That's why you should be a ghost. Remember, you can't video record a ghost. Chapter 12. Everyone has their own morning routine. Some people need exercise, some people need coffee, and some need both. Substitute teaching first thing in the morning isn't easy. You have to be fully alert. Just for fun, I like to ask teachers, "Did you take a cold shower this morning?" They initially laugh at what they think is a joke, but their laughter quickly turns to fear as I begin explaining the benefits of cold showers. They eventually call me crazy and walk away from me. If only they knew this amazing secret. In the military, soldiers make up their beds first thing in the morning to get a sense of accomplishment. The earlier in the day you complete stuff, the better off you'll be. It's the same reason why the Navy SEALs take early morning cold showers. The best thing you can do is feel a sense of accomplishment as early in the day as possible, no matter how small that accomplishment is. Try this tomorrow morning. Wake up at 5 a.m., do your laundry, clean your bathroom, go to the gym, then come home to a healthy breakfast and freezing cold shower. Your day will be magical. If I can go back in time and tell my younger self only one piece of advice, I would tell myself to start taking cold showers. They're amazing, and you'll notice the benefits immediately. Many people from different professions use them. Doctors use them as shock therapy for mental patients. Athletes take ice baths while meditating. Public speakers take cold showers before addressing crowds. And substitute teachers take cold showers and drink whiskey before going to work. Think of cold showers as vaccinations against future pain. When you take a cold shower, you're intentionally stressing yourself in a controlled environment to prepare for future stress. And by future stress, I'm referring to public school students. I've been taking cold showers for the past 5 years, and I'm never going back. Every aspect of my life has improved. I know it sounds too good to be true, so go online and see for yourself. Many people are talking about it. Cold water is good for your mood, your skin, your blood, your spirit, and probably a bunch of other things. Contrast showers are also good. That's when you alternate hot and cold every 30 seconds. I recently learned from an Uber passenger who worked at a mental asylum that people with depression swear by contrast showers. I know it's hard to believe, but I'm a personal witness that ice-cold showers will improve your life. As a human race, why do we wake up from comfortable beds and jump into comfortable showers? We should be doing the opposite. The only time I take hot showers is before bed. If I take one in the morning, I'll be way too drowsy to start my day. They sound intimidating, but cold showers won't kill you. They'll make you stronger. You'll be laser focused first thing in the morning. While your coworkers are half asleep, you'll feel like the predator. And if you add coffee to the mix, forget about it. If you hate rush hour traffic, start your day with a cold shower. The traffic won't bother you as much. If you're trying to lose weight, take cold showers. They'll strengthen your willpower and you won't eat junk food. Cold showers will make you fearless. Trust me, you'll turn into a warrior. If you're able to take a freezing cold shower in the middle of December, do you think something as harmless as a job interview would make you nervous? If you're tired of telling students to put away their cell phones, start taking cold showers. By the way, you can't write a book on teaching without mentioning cell phones. Every student has one, and some even have two. Students are equipped with unlimited data, like soldiers are equipped with bullets. In other words, prepare for a fight. I suggest that everyone teach in a public school for only one day just to see how much things have changed. Observing today's students is so funny. They're all on the phone, either listening to music or playing a video game. Back in the day, we got in trouble for listening to music. I'm from the generation of pagers and 25-cent payphones. Music was completely off limits. Remember the thrill of listening to your Walkman in the hallway? I felt like a rebel. I went to high school from 1994 to 1998. During those 4 years, not a single friend of mine had a cell phone. And I'm not exaggerating, nobody had one. Except one guy I knew named Dwayne. He wasn't my friend though, just an acquaintance. He was a senior when I was a freshman, so we never crossed paths. The only reason why I knew him was because I played basketball with his younger brother. This dude got all the girls, wore the best clothes, and was the only person I knew who had a cell phone. Not just in school either, I mean the only person in life. Up until then, I didn't know anyone who had one. My dad had a car phone, but it wasn't portable, plus it weighed 15 pounds. Dwayne didn't know this yet, but he was going to be responsible for my very first experience using a cell phone. A person born in the year 2000 can't remember the first time they used a cell phone. They were born with it. But I was born in 1980, so I vividly remember. It was during my freshman year in the fall of '94. I'll never forget the following story until the day I die. Anytime I stayed after school, I had to call the house. And because of that, I always kept a quarter for the payphone. One evening, our basketball team traveled across the border to play against a school in Pennsylvania. I didn't realize we had the late game, so I was going to be home very late, meaning I really needed to call home. So I left the locker room and walked to the lobby of this unfamiliar school we were playing against. I found a payphone and put in a quarter, only to hear the machine tell me to insert more money. The problem was I was calling Delaware from a Pennsylvania payphone. I thought, uh-oh. I didn't want to call collect, so I hung up the phone. Meanwhile, my teammates were in the locker room preparing for the game, and I still needed to get changed. So I decided to forget about the phone call and run to the gym. That's when I saw Dwayne. If memory serves me correct, he had the Craig Mack haircut, black jean jacket, and the cleanest pair of white sneakers. He was also on his phone. I still remember how cool he looked. Remember, A teenager talking on a cell phone in 1994 was not a common sight. So I approached him and said, "Hi, Dwayne. I don't know if you remember me, but I play basketball with your brother. Can I use your phone to call my house?" I'll never ever forget his response. "Nah, young blood, that'll cost me $5. $5? How was that possible? This was 1994 and I was only 14, so I knew nothing about phones. Service providers and cell phone plans meant nothing to me. All I knew about was basketball and Sega Genesis. Plus, the most I ever paid for a phone call was 25 cents, so $5 completely blew my mind. I guess Dwayne felt sorry for me. As I was walking away, he shouted, "Young blood, come here." I walked back to him and he said, "You gonna call your mom?" I told him yes, and he said, "Make it quick." Man, what happened next was amazing. I was in the lobby of an unfamiliar school, standing next to who I thought was the coolest kid in the building, and I was holding a cell phone, an early 90s Motorola flip phone. If you search the phrase 1994 cell phones, it's the one with the plastic antenna and flipped open keypad. What's funny is, I don't remember talking to my mom. I don't even know who answered the house phone. It might have been my dad or my brother, who knows? But what I do remember was standing next to Dwayne while using a cell phone. After the call ended, I remember feeling so good. It felt like I was in the future. I just used a cell phone. I even noticed a few cheerleaders staring at us, but looking back on it, they were probably staring at Dwayne. I often think about how difficult it was for Dwayne to pay attention in class. He had a cell phone, so he was probably distracted, right? Well, maybe not. For one, not many other people had cell phones back then, so who was there to talk to? He could have been calling his friends on their house phones, but his friends were in school with him. Also, texting and mobile internet wouldn't be available for another decade. I also think about how advanced Dwayne was for having a cell phone in 1994. What boggles my mind is, I went to high school for 3 more years, graduated in 1998, and I still didn't meet a classmate who had a phone. Think about it. From 1995 through 1998, not a single classmate had a phone, but Dwayne had one in 94. Anyway, that concludes my cell phone story. Telling it makes me feel old, but the following makes me feel even older. I was teaching a middle school class in 2018, and I told that entire story to a group of 12-year-olds. When I finished, a student asked me the funniest question ever. "What's a payphone?" Today's teachers compete against cell phones. They spend so much energy telling kids to put them away. How can you teach when everyone's texting? After a while, some teachers get fed up and take the phone. "That's it, give me the phone, you'll get it back at the end of the period." Whenever I see students begging for their phone, it's funny at first, but it also makes me realize just how addicting they are. It's also funny when students fight over power outlets. They always tell me their phone is about to die, as if I care. Some schools got smart and began sealing the electrical outlets with duct tape. But since the teacher's desk is usually near a power strip, guess where students like to huddle? All up in my personal space. When 3 teenagers are fighting over one power outlet, you can't help but laugh. I rarely see physical bullying, but cyber bullies are everywhere. I always see students arguing over something that started on social media. God, I'm glad I went to school in the 90s. Just spend 5 minutes around today's youth and you'll hear things like, "You better delete that pic, you better not post that." Neither of those statements will make any sense in the 90s. Delete what pic? Post what? What's post? And what about this phrase that swept the nation a few years ago? "Do it for the gram." That's another statement that wouldn't make any sense during my high school years. Do it for the gram. Make a fool of yourself for the gram. Potentially get suspended for the gram. It's all entertainment to me, so by all means, continue doing it for the gram. Substitute teachers are bored and we want to see gram-related suspensions. I wonder if Alexander Graham Bell knew what he started. If we were still using telegrams, there would be no gram-related suspensions, just horse poop everywhere. In my opinion, smartphones will eventually take over the educational system. Textbooks are out, Chromebooks are in. I see something bigger though, like a nationwide science app only accessible by phone, or a math app that tracks your progress against the world. And with student obesity rising, one day you might be able to download a gym app. How cool would that be? Overweight students won't have to go to gym class anymore. Their avatar will go. By the way, student obesity is out of control. If you don't believe me, go to your nearest school and see for yourself. I'm not ridiculing anyone, I'm just reporting on what I see. Back in the day, overweight teenagers wore baggy clothes, but now it's common to see overweight kids wearing medium t-shirts, letting everything hang out. It's good to have high self-esteem. It's good to feel great about your body. So I'm glad when I see a 200-pound third grader eating 4 ice cream sandwiches. But is that healthy? In my opinion, lack of exercise is not the problem when it comes to losing weight. If you don't believe me, try finding a parking spot at the fitness center. You can't. Everyone's exercising. The real problem is you can't find parking at McDonald's. Weight loss is pretty simple. Burn more calories than you consume. A few years ago, I lost over 20 pounds just by walking and intermittent fasting. That experience taught me that weight loss is all about willpower. And every one of us can increase our willpower by doing things that are uncomfortable. For example, taking cold showers. I love hearing teaching stories from the 80s. An older teacher once told me that back then, teaching was way more hands-on. Students got bored faster, but it's totally different now. With smartphones everywhere, a bored student can just go online. Download as many apps as you can, kids. Just stay busy. Back in the 80s, teachers were breaking up fights and putting out cigarettes. I'm reminded of Morgan Freeman in the movie Lean on Me. You'll be dead in a year, kid. Subs don't do much anymore. Some days are exciting, but others are painfully boring. Boring days are the worst. I fell asleep in front of students many times. If you only speak when spoken to, you can go a long time without uttering a single word. So I guess what I'm saying is, God bless the smartphone. One thing I really love about subbing is, students always teach me something new. If you ever have an issue with your phone, don't call tech support, just ask a student. These little aliens know everything. In fact, students were the first ones to show me a couple of things, like Touch ID with my fingerprint, or the Samsung folding phone, or even downloading Burner, the app with extra phone numbers on it. And the first time I heard of an airdrop was years ago when I was teaching a middle school class. It was students who taught me these things. By the way, here's another phrase students say. Dude, let me use your hotspot. Imagine hearing that in the 90s. You want to use my what? Nah, man, those are fighting words. Chapter 13. Whenever you teach at elementary schools, some kids will say the craziest things to you. I was teaching first grade one day when a student called me to his desk. Come here, come here, come here, come here. I thought he needed crayons or something, but quickly found out he needed something else. This innocent little boy whispered in my ear and asked me the craziest question. Would you rather blow up a hospital filled with strangers or blow up your house with your family in it? I couldn't believe the question, so I asked him to repeat himself, but I heard correctly the first time. Little Timmy was thirsty for blood. He was only in first grade, but I was already scared of him. Students are very impressionable at this age, so I had to carefully answer his question. Both, I said. Let's blow up both. Just kidding, I didn't say that. Instead, I told him that killing people is wrong. Well, he didn't like that answer. You have to choose, he said. Who should we explode? Who should we explode? Man, they don't pay me enough for this. I just walked away from him. The main requirement for substitute teaching is passing a background test, and your pay is based on your furthest level of education. As of now, a bachelor's degree gets you about $100 a day, which isn't bad just to take attendance and pass out a packet. Uber drivers can make more, but you have to hustle. Some drivers only work in specific areas, meaning after they finish a ride, they log off and drive right back to where they started. Once they return to home base, so to speak, they log back on and wait for the next passenger. Home bases can range from train stations, bus stations, airports, hotels, and malls. This strategy of driving back to a specific starting point is flawed in my opinion. You're driving without a passenger. Imagine the airport is your home base. Let's say you took someone from the airport to North Philly. After dropping them off, you drive back to the airport without a passenger. To me, that's a waste. Here's a different scenario. Imagine taking that same passenger to North Philly, but instead of driving back to the airport, just stay in North Philly. Within 15 minutes, you'll get another ride. the next passenger may want to go to Derby. And then from Derby, the next passenger may want to go to Malvern. And then from Malvern, the next passenger might take you right back to the airport. If you follow this strategy, you'll always have a passenger in your car. But the downside is you can end up far away from your house. Uber has a tool called the destination filter. It's nice when it works properly, but sometimes it's trash. Basically, Uber lets you decide where you want to travel. Based on the destination you choose, you'll only receive rides in that specific direction. But like I said, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I only use the filter once a day, at the end of my shift. If I start working in Delaware, then 8 hours later finish my last ride in New Jersey, I use the filter to take me back to Delaware. My go-to destination is the Wilmington train station. Chances are, nobody from Jersey needs a ride to that specific station, but someone from Jersey might need a ride to Philly. After taking them to Philly, I pull over and relax. Within 30 minutes, someone from Philly may need a ride to Chester. Same thing, pull over and relax. Then 20 minutes later, someone from Chester might need a ride to Marcus Hook. Then from Marcus Hook, I'll take someone to Delaware. You might get lucky and have a passenger take you from Jersey directly to Delaware, but that never happens. It usually takes between 4 to 6 rides to get back home, but that's fine. Just turn off the engine and take a walk. But don't walk too far, or else you'll be jogging back to your car after accepting a ride. The act of logging off isn't the issue, you just don't want to log off and drive without a passenger. That's called wasting gas. One day I was in Conshohocken and I picked up a guy on Main Street. The moment he got my car, he said, "We are so lucky to be living in America. Half of us have no idea what struggle really is." I looked in the mirror and noticed that his face was covered in tattoos and piercings. But like I said, I'm no longer judging people based on how they look. That's the benefit of Uber driving. You interact with all types of people, so you automatically become less judgmental. As we cruised down the highway, he told me all about his accounting career. At his most recent job, his boss told him to cook the books. But when the company got audited, that same boss threw him under the bus and made him take the blame. It was at that moment he decided to quit accounting for good. When I asked him why he quit the entire field as opposed to just finding another job, he told me, "I'm a recovering drug addict." Then he started telling me about his former life as a junkie. He was fully functioning at first, but over time, he spent all of his money and lost all of his friends. That's when he hit rock bottom. "Getting high was fun," he said, "but there's no better feeling than being sober. I am never going back to drugs." Then he told me about his new philosophy on life. As an accountant, he had the ability to save companies thousands of dollars, but now his words of encouragement have the ability to save an addict's life. He stressed to me that he would rather save lives than save someone else money. As we approached his destination, I saw a big sign that said, "Drug Rehabilitation Center." Before I could say anything, he said, "I don't do drugs anymore. I work here. I'm a drug counselor." The ride lasted about 30 minutes and I barely said a word. I listened to everything he had to say. Remember rule number 2? Only speak when spoken to. Thanks to Uber, that was the first conversation I ever had with a drug counselor. Hospitals usually have a need for Uber drivers. Remember, some patients came in an ambulance and don't have a ride home. One sunny day, I picked up an older guy from the St. Francis Hospital. He was a rough-looking dude with a big cast on his hand, missing teeth, band-aids on his face, and tattoos everywhere. It was easy to see that he had a rough life, and I was eagerly waiting to hear all about it. The first thing he told me was that he injured his arm by reaching underneath a moving lawnmower, which is a crazy thing to do. Then I asked if he owns a landscaping business. "Nah, I don't own anything," he said. "I'm just a worker." Then came the stories. He had multiple felonies on his record, which made it hard for him to find work. He was 55 years old with no retirement account and very little skills. Plus, he spent over 30 years in prison. "I made so many mistakes in my life," he told me. He grew up in Wilmington near Adams Street, directly under I-95. When he was younger, him and his friends ran the streets like there was no tomorrow. But when he got caught up in the criminal system, everything changed. He told me his very first arrest caused a chain reaction which he was never able to recover from. Back when he was in school, he said you were either a nerd or a cool dude, and since he didn't care for the books, he always tried to be cool. I never wanted to be a nerd, he said, but you know what? If I had a time machine, I'd turn back the clock and finish school. I'd be the biggest nerd in the world. He was an Irish kid who grew up in a black neighborhood, which he described as dangerous and violent. Sometime in the late 70s, one thing led to another and he started selling cocaine. He tried to stop, but he was making too much money. According to him, he was tripling his mother's yearly salary in just 1 week. The fast life was so addicting, he said. I was making $100 every 2 minutes. How could I stop? He also told me he had a 32-year-old daughter, but she completely cut him off. He hasn't seen her in so long, he wouldn't recognize her if she was standing right next to him. His story proves that drugs truly destroy a family, whether selling them or using them. Then he told me about his late mother's advice. He said, I remember sitting in jail thinking of my mother's words. She always told me to stay in school and leave the streets alone. But I wanted to be a cool dude, so I never listened. But now, I see exactly what she meant. I should have listened to my mother. He stopped talking and closed his eyes for a moment. Every few seconds, he mumbled to himself, I should have listened to my mother. I looked through the mirror and stared at him. He seemed like someone who learned from his mistakes. Unfortunately, though, he learned the hard way. His criminal history followed him everywhere he went. I wish some of the bad kids that I teach listened to his story. He's the reason why I tell them to stop misbehaving. They think everything is a joke. I always tell the troublemakers, there's 2 types of people in this world. People who learn the easy way and people who learn the hard way. As we drove down the highway, he had my undivided attention. I listened to each one of his stories as if they were life lessons meant for me. In fact, the more he spoke, the more grateful I was for my parents and how they kept me on the right path. As we approached his neighborhood, he continued telling me stories. Unlike other passengers who love bragging, this guy was the opposite. He was the most humble person I've ever met. He was telling me his mistakes to make sure I didn't follow his footsteps. At the end of his street, I noticed a bar. Hey, can I get you a beer? I asked. He quickly said, thanks, but I've been sober for 11 months. Bars are completely off limits. No offense, but I can't go back to that life. And I responded, no offense taken. I completely understand. Nowadays, whenever he sees young people strung out on drugs, it's a painful reminder of his past life as a drug dealer. So, to help him deal with the guilt, he helps teenagers by becoming a visual deterrent, as he called it. He shows them his missing teeth, his prison tattoos, and shares all of his mistakes. My goal is to make sure they don't end up like me, he said. He was happy to hear that I graduated from college. He also applauded me for keeping my car so clean. If a man keeps his car clean, then that man has decent character, he said. I'm sure he had his reasons for coming to that conclusion, so I thanked him for the compliment and respected what he said. As he exited my car, the last thing he said to me was, have a nice day, young man. Stay on the straight and narrow. Such an interesting job, from drug counselor to drug dealer and everyone in between. If it wasn't for Uber, how would I meet these people? In and out of my life, never to be seen again. Chapter 14. Although substitute teaching allows you to work in different parts of the city, you're stuck inside a building. But Uber is the opposite. The city is your playground. At any given moment, you'll find yourself so far away from home in the most random places imaginable. By the way, Wawa might be the best gas station on earth. If your tires need air, Wawa has free air machines. If you need to wash your hands, Wawa has bathrooms. Coffee and gas, go to Wawa. Free water, again, Wawa. Wawas are popping up everywhere. One day, I want to see an intersection with a Wawa on each corner. 4 Wawas, imagine that. In my lifetime, I've spent thousands of dollars at Wawa, and no doubt I'll be spending thousands more. So, shout out to Wawa. In addition to Wawa's, I also take breaks at parks. Waiting for passengers can get boring, so a quick nature walk is perfect. You can stretch your legs, feed the ducks, talk to the squirrels, plenty of stuff to do in nature. It took Uber driving for me to realize just how important public parks are. In fact, when I retire, I'm gonna get a dog and roam the country with a video camera, documenting as many parks as possible, from the large ones with lakes to the small ones in the back of the projects littered with condoms and broken glass. After dropping someone off in Chester one day, I found myself near the prison. Chester Correctional, to be exact. It's literally next door to the casino, as crazy as that sounds. I drove through a few more intersections when all of a sudden, I turned down a street that was completely abandoned. Every single house was boarded up, and I didn't see anyone. Not a person, a dog, a cat, a bird, nothing. No life whatsoever. It looked like Will Smith, I Am Legend. I got out my car and started walking around, hoping I would see a zombie. In the distance, I saw a park with uncut grass almost 2 feet high. It was nature at its finest. A few moments later, I was walking through the park, high-stepping through grass that was up to my knees. The swing sets were completely covered in rust and trash was everywhere. As I approached the basketball court, I saw a ball sitting in the grass. I picked it up, and right before I took my first shot, that's when I noticed the bullet holes. Yes, bullet holes were in the backboard. I pulled out my phone and started recording a mini documentary. It was at that moment when I figured out my retirement plans. Park documentaries. In the video, you can hear me saying, "As you can see right here, there's broken glass on the basketball court. The players must have gotten into a fight. And as you can see right there, cigarette butts. Oh, that's nice. The players took a smoke break." And if you look at the backboard, based on those bullet holes, I think the word jump shot has a different meaning in this neighborhood. Parks and public libraries are the perfect pit stops for Uber drivers. I visit them as often as possible, even during a passenger's trip. The passenger is very confused when I pull over and say, "Hey, listen, I gotta return this book, then I gotta take a walk. You might want to stay in the car though. I saw bullet holes." Just kidding. I love taking breaks in West Philly. There's always something going on. Everybody on Market Street has a story to tell, and believe me, they can't wait to tell it. Cops, crackheads, homeless people, I talk to everybody out there. Next time you're bored, walk around your city and speak to these creatures. Northeast Philly, specifically Kensington, is fentanyl central. Those afternoon walks are very exciting. For reasons I'll explain later, cops don't arrest anyone, so it's normal to see dozens of people injecting themselves in broad daylight. I've interacted with many characters over the years, but nothing beats a street cat from Kensington. Zombies with no front teeth will tell you their entire life story, then ask to borrow 21 cents. It looks like Michael Jackson's Thriller video out there. In fact, one time, I made the mistake of walking through Kensington after midnight. I really hope my eyes were playing tricks on me, but I think I saw a werewolf. I also roam the Badlands, but only in the daytime. I walk with a bop in my step, so the youngins always try to sell me something. "Yo, what's up, OG? I got loud, Reggie, perks, whatever you need, OG." Sometimes I put 5 $1 bills in my pocket, then give them to the first 5 beggars who ask. First come, first serve. It's actually selfish though. The only reason I donate is to make me feel better about myself, not to let them buy dope. But if smoking dope makes them feel better, then hey, it makes me feel better too. One evening, a junkie approached me and said, "What's up, superstar? You got 25 cents? I said, "Nah, I don't." "You ain't got 25 cents? Well shit, give me $1 then." I tried to make him feel a little grateful by saying, "You need money? Damn man, I'm down to my last $2 fam, but here you go cuz, take this." And the moment I gave him $1, he said what they all say when you give him $1. "Thanks, but can you spare another $1?" Another time, I was walking through Kensington when a junkie asked me for some food. I said, "No problem, I got you." I went into the corner store and got him a slice of pizza, but when I came outside and handed it to him, he said, "Oh wait, I can't eat cheese." As if I was supposed to know that. I said, "Man, I don't give a fuck." I wasn't mad at him, but man, these junkies got some nerve. I should have said, "Oh, you can't eat cheese, but you can do heroin, right?" Then again, I shouldn't have said anything at all. The poor guy looked like the crypt keeper. Speaking of drug use in Kensington, One day I picked up a 36-year-old white guy who was an off-duty cop. He shared some crazy stories with me, specifically of drunk people vomiting in his police cruiser. He asked me if Uber passengers ever puked in my car, and I told him, nope, I drive people to the bar, not from the bar. Plus, I don't drive past midnight. He laughed and said, man, I wish I could say that. I patrol the city overnight when the freaks come out. Then we started talking about how drug use, for some weird reason, seems to be decriminalized in Kensington. That's when he told me something that black people have been saying for years. He asked me, do you know why they don't arrest any heroin users in Kensington? I said no. He said because almost all of them are white, and no offense, but if it was a bunch of black people doing heroin in public, they would have been arrested everybody. This was a white police officer telling me this, so I made sure to thank him for acknowledging that. Then he said, dude, I'm a police officer in Philly. I've seen it all. I've done many round trips to Kensington, and it's always the same old story. I pull up to a nice house in the suburbs, and a normal-looking guy hops in my car. Then he tells me the plan. Hey man, I need a ride to Kensington, but if you don't mind waiting there, I'll give you cash to bring me back. They're very honest too. Most people would keep their heroin addiction a secret, but in their eyes, I'm just an Uber driver they will never ever see again. One time, I picked up a fisherman who told me he makes $200,000 a year catching crabs. I picked him up from the suburbs, and when we got to Kensington, he said, hey man, I'm only gonna be 10 minutes, so if you wanna take me back home, I'll give you $80. So I pulled over and let him out, and he disappeared into an alley. I've taken so many walks through Kensington that nothing really surprises me anymore, but I'll try to paint a picture for you. Piles of old, used up needles all over the street, about 30 people injecting themselves in broad daylight, and police officers just standing around watching everything. About 10 minutes later, my passenger walked out of the alley looking high as hell. I thought he was only purchasing drugs. I didn't think he was going to use them out here. But I was wrong, because even though it was freezing that day, he started to undress the moment he got in my car. Can you turn the heater off? I'm burning up, he said. First, he took off his jacket, then he took off his hoodie. Then a few moments later, he took off his shirt. Wearing only a tank top, he laid down in my back seat and took a nap. As we passed the Eagle Stadium on I-95, he did something that I've never seen someone do. Without any warning, he suddenly woke up and started yelling, "Was that you?" So I said, "Was what me?" "Was that you?" he yelled. Again, I said, "Was what me?" Then he started kicking my seat and yelling, "Was that you? Was that you?" I shouted back, "I don't know what you're talking about." Then he paused, looked out the window, and said, "Oh, I'm sorry. I thought that was you." Man, this guy was high as a kite. One night, I was taking a walk in West Philly when I saw a guy standing all by himself on 46 and Market. Something about him seemed odd, but I just couldn't put my finger on it. Isn't it funny when you look back at certain situations in life and realize in hindsight that your intuition in that specific moment was correct? I say that because, as crazy as this sounds, I knew this guy had something to tell me. I didn't know what though. As I approached him, I looked at him a bit more closely. He seemed like the perfect night crawler to have a conversation with. As we made eye contact, he respectfully asked, "Hey, want to hear a freestyle?" So without any hesitation, he started rapping his ass off. He was going strong for about a minute, then suddenly he stopped, looked at me, and calmly said, "I just broke free from the Matrix." So I replied, "Me too." It was weird. When I told him that I also broke free from the Matrix, he didn't say anything. Instead, he gave me an eerie stare. Then he said, "Hey, listen, my rap name is Jody Yobro. I'm homeless and I rap for money. Can I get $1? I said, "Of course." So I gave him $1. First come, first serve. Later that night, I searched his name and found some of his songs. I also read a few comments that said, "Yo, bro, I saw you on the train. You can rap. Yo, I saw you on Broad Street. Thanks for the freestyle." I should have posted a comment too. I would have wrote, "Hey, I met you on 46th Street. Thanks for the freestyle. And if you ever need a ride, I got you, Jody Yobro." I was 15 years old in 1995, the mid-90s. Man, I miss those times. Back then, basketball courts, skate parks, and malls were the best places for teenagers to hang out. This may not make sense to today's kids. They grew up with the internet. but I never even heard of the word internet until 1996. I already had my driver's license by then. Just like I'll never forget the first time I used a cell phone, I'll never forget the first time I went online. One day, our 10th grade English teacher said, "Hey everyone, we're going on a field trip. We're going to the library to learn about the future of communication, something called electronic mail. Anyone ever heard of the World Wide Web?" When nobody responded, he said, "Oh, I'm sorry, it goes by another name. It's also called the internet. Anyone ever heard of the internet?" To this day, I'll never forget how foreign that word sounded. Students responded, "The inter who?" For the next 30 minutes, we all gathered around the computers, taking turns using the search engine. This might sound crazy, but I still remember my very first internet search. Barry Sanders football highlights. Now don't ask me to share any other searches. But like I said, I was 16 when I first used the internet, and since I didn't grow up with it, I never craved it back then. I was more interested in borrowing my parents' car so I could roam the city. Growing up when I did, our thrills came from playing tackle football, snowball fights, and ringing doorbells and running away. Today's kids have online gaming, and that's awesome. Trust me, I'm addicted to Xbox like everyone else. But back in the day, we had something even better. Mall arcades. Ask anyone over the age of 40 about the arcade era of the 80s. Back then, gaming consoles sucked, so the only place to get your game on was at the arcade. All you needed was 6 quarters to have a good time. When Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter first came out, the arcade got so crowded you couldn't even see the screens. We would bob and weave our way to the front of the line just to catch a glimpse. One Friday night back in '93, my mom picked us up from the Y and took us to the mall. She gave us some money and told us to stay in the arcade while she went shopping. When I looked around, I noticed a bunch of people surrounding one specific game. I remember thinking, what game could that be? I slowly maneuvered through the crowd and got near the front. When I looked up, I saw big yellow letters that said, Mortal Kombat. I heard about this game in school, but this was the first time I saw it in person. I'll never forget, when I looked at the screen, the very first thing I saw was Sub-Zero freeze someone. That completely blew my mind. Up until then, we never saw anything like that in a video game. Getting a front row view of Mortal Kombat was like getting into VIP. I vividly remember people shoving each other just to get closer. Gambling at the arcade was also fun. We weren't betting a lot of money, but that wasn't the point. Gambling against a complete stranger was so thrilling. I remember playing Street Fighter at an arcade in Wildwood, New Jersey, where I battled a grown man for over 30 minutes. When we finally called it quits, he said, "Man, I'm glad you didn't take all my money. This my bus money." I'll never forget that. Now that I think about it, forget social media. 90s arcades were truly social. Like everything else, things change. Even though malls are nearly dead, I still visit them for nostalgia. In between Uber rides, I visit plenty malls throughout the tri-state. Plymouth Meeting, Montgomery County, Willow Grove, Cherry Hill, Franklin Mills, and of course the King of Prussia Mall. Before Uber, I never went to these malls. They're over an hour away from my house. Nothing about an Uber schedule is set in stone. You're self-employed, so you have the freedom to work whenever you want. A corporate lunch break is an hour long, so you don't want to venture too far away from your job. But with Uber, you can take breaks at any time and any place. And what better way to relax than shuffling through the clearance section in random malls? I never schedule my driving breaks. Instead, I take them at the most random times throughout the day. By the way, randomizing your day is a perfect remedy for procrastination, especially when you have a lot of stuff to do. Just do something to get the ball rolling and momentum will take over. Also, think about when a group of friends are trying to coordinate something. Nothing ever gets done because everyone wants to lead. The next time you and your friends are arguing over where to go next, just interrupt everyone and say, "Hey guys, let's just walk down the street and see what happens." Who knows, you might bump into a stick-up kid named Mike. Remember, it's all random. I love when a passenger's destination is near a mall. For over 10 years, I worked at the same bank with the same 9-to-5 schedule. But now, you might find me walking through a mall at 10 a.m. I usually see mothers pushing baby strollers or retired people sitting near the water fountain. As I walk by, I throw a penny in the water, make a wish for good luck, then I'm off to the food court. I love food courts, by the way. I visit them so often, I've become a food court connoisseur. Every mall's food court is pretty much the same. Subway sandwiches, Sbarro pizza, the pretzel shop, and of course, massage chairs. Too much driving can tighten up your lower back, so massage chairs are perfect for Uber drivers. In fact, the next time you're at the mall, look at the guy who's half asleep on a massage chair. That's me. I love going to malls far away from my house because no one knows me. If I go to a local mall, I might see friends from over 25 years ago. There's nothing wrong with that, but I don't always feel like catching up. Instead, I like going to malls that are 55 miles away. Strangers only. Substitute teaching and Uber driving will quickly improve your social skills. In our society, we're always taught to ignore strangers. That's good advice for children, but it might not be that good for adults. Strangers are very interesting creatures. In fact, if you take the last letter, R, off of the word stranger, do you know what you get? Strange. Ever since I joined Uber, my cigarette knowledge has drastically improved. Cigarette knowledge is a term that I accidentally invented many years ago while walking the boardwalk with my cousin. When I say cigarette knowledge, you're probably thinking of something completely different than what I mean. Basically, two things are involved: a cigarette and a stranger. Although smoking isn't required, interacting with strangers is mandatory. Over the years, I've had a couple of friends who smoked. Hanging out with them taught me some interesting things about smokers. They always look out for each other. If a smoker needs a cigarette, a lot of times a complete stranger will provide one. But here's where the knowledge comes in. Giving away a free cigarette is an automatic conversation starter. Sure, you can take the cigarette and walk away, but most people don't. They always stick around and chat for a minute. And those smoky conversations are surprisingly educational. One time, my buddy gave a cigarette to a lady and she said, "Y'all hear about the new tattoo parlor they're building right there?" Neither one of us knew about it, but a few months later, there was a tattoo parlor right where she said it would be. For some reason, I felt empowered by this information. I remember thinking, if I wasn't with my friend, I wouldn't have met this lady. And if I never met this lady, I wouldn't have known about the tattoo parlor months in advance. I received this knowledge when a cigarette exchanged hands, hence the term cigarette knowledge. Another time, my cousin and I were in Atlantic City walking the boardwalk. That afternoon, he must have given away and received over 2 packs worth of cigarettes. We spoke to over 20 strangers that day, and those conversations were awesome. Cigarette knowledge randomly finds you when you least expect it. Uber passengers have some, drunk people at the bar have even more, but your local mall has the most. There's 2 things I noticed about mall employees. 1, they're usually polite, and 2, they're desperate for conversations. Next time you go shopping, look how lonely they look in their kiosk. Nobody's buying their jewelry. They're just sitting around ready to talk. I dare you to approach one of them and mention Uber. I once told a kiosk employee that I was taking an Uber break. She immediately stopped everything she was doing to tell me about her uncle. He was the type of person who never wanted a boss, so he worked as a handyman, personal trainer, and driver. In fact, he drove for Uber and Lyft. According to her, he was making very good money. Before taking an Uber break, make sure to log off. If you stay online while ignoring requests, your acceptance rate will decline. It's not the worst thing that can happen, but it only hurts your profile. Many times I've ignored requests without even realizing it. Either my phone was on vibrate or I didn't hear it ring. By the way, there's something fun about walking through malls on a Saturday afternoon. Even if I don't spend a dime, I always get those warm, fuzzy feelings once the nostalgia kicks in. One Saturday, I dropped someone off in Central Jersey, then went online to find the nearest mall. After entering the food court, I bought a small coffee and roamed around. Then I found a massage chair and put in $5. About a minute later, my phone buzzed for a ride. Oops, forgot to log off. So I reluctantly ended the massage, then started jogging out of the mall. I glanced at the GPS and noticed the rider was close by. I had to quickly get to my car. As I turned a corner, I ran past a vape shop and bumped into an old lady wearing neon green pants. After nearly colliding, we both apologized and I continued jogging towards the exit. When I got to my car, I saw a text message from the passenger telling me she's about to walk out of the mall. I responded with my favorite copy and paste Uber response. Take your time, see you soon. About a minute later, she texted again saying, I'm walking out now. I'm wearing a white shirt and neon green pants. You can't miss me. Wait, neon green? I knew exactly who to look for. As expected, I saw a lady with green pants exiting the mall. I approached the curb, tapped my horn, and pulled down the window. She looked at me and said, Hey, it's you. I started the conversation by telling her that I was sitting in a massage chair when I got her ride request. She was amazed. That's so convenient, she said. For some reason, she thought Uber was a 9-to-5 job that had a boss. I told her, I don't have a boss in a traditional sense, but technically, you're my boss right now. She was familiar with Uber, but only from a passenger's point of view. She was very entertained when I explained it from the driver's perspective. She seemed to enjoy everything I said, so I mentioned Uber's referral program. I told her if she ever decided to drive, she could use my name and we could split the bonus. But that's when she interrupted me and said, Oh no, I smoke way too much pot. Uber better not hire me. Stoner, I knew it. In hindsight, I was glad I quit the massage and took this ride. She began telling me everything there was to know about marijuana. Her weed stories were hilarious. One time, she got so high that she lost her cat. After searching the entire house, she decided to call the neighbors, but when she reached for her phone, she was holding the cat the entire time. She told me whenever she smokes weed, she can't stop eating. I can't control my munchies, she said. One night, her roommate baked a cake for a special occasion. Well, after smoking a joint all by herself, she ate the entire cake and fell asleep. Her roommate was so mad, she banged on her bedroom door, woke her up, and demanded an explanation. My passenger was so high that she literally told her, I didn't eat the cake, the aliens ate it. Her third story was my favorite. One time in the late 70s, she went to a music festival with her friends. When they got there, they bought weed from a stranger and started smoking in the woods. But less than 2 minutes later, they knew something was wrong. He laced our weed, she said. She didn't know what it was, but it got them so paranoid, they left the festival. As they were leaving, she was driving so fast that her friends were begging her to slow down. She was driving reckless, according to her friends. As expected, they got pulled over, and when the officer approached the window, he told her, and I quote, "You need to speed up, ma'am. You're driving way too slow." They weren't driving reckless. They were high. As we cruised down the freeway, I was getting high just listening to her. It was entertaining, though. This was the definition of cigarette knowledge. After telling me a few more stories, she turned her attention to legalization. One day, this entire country will legalize pot, she said. Just imagine the amount of taxes they'll collect. I agreed with her, mentioning how those additional taxes will improve the roads. I said, if the government legalizes pot, we better not have any potholes. Know what I mean? She loved that joke, by the way. The ride lasted about an hour. When I got to her destination, she said, "I'm so glad you were my driver today. Nice talking with you. Enjoy the rest of your day, young man." I thanked her as well, and she closed the door. As I watched her walk down the street, I said to myself, I'll never see that lady ever again. What an interesting job. It's funny how close you can get to someone, then when the ride comes to an end, poof, they disappear, never to be seen again. At the time of this writing, my Uber profile has hundreds of 5-star ratings. Although I'm proud of that, what bothers me most is a single 1-star rating I received a few months ago. How did that happen? I told my buddy about it, and he said it probably came from a hater. Maybe he's right. I'm always respectful, my car is always clean, and I drive safe. And on top of that, I get plenty of tips. I can't be that bad of a driver, so why the low rating? Well, after giving it some thought, I realized it probably came from an Uber Pool passenger. Uber Pool is a carpooling option for people who want to save money. As a driver, I don't like Uber Pool, not because of the crowded car, but because of the pay. If I carpool 3 people to work, I should get paid for 3 separate fares, but instead, Uber pays us only a small amount for each additional pickup while charging each passenger full price. The additional pickups are all going in the same direction, so I guess I shouldn't complain, right? After all, nobody's forcing me to drive, right? Wrong. Uber pool sucks. One morning, I picked up a guy from Ridley Park around 8 a.m. I'll never forget this guy. His name was John and he smelled like trash. He was a very nice person, but he smelled like sweat, dirty clothes, cigarette smoke, poop, and just a whole bunch of sweaty, dirty clothes. The moment he entered my car, I smelled him, so I quickly pulled down the windows and turned up the air conditioner. The problem was, this was going to be a long ride to Allegheny Avenue in North Philly, and with morning traffic, this was going to be a gas chamber. I kept thinking to myself, what kind of person rolls out of bed smelling like this? There's no way he took a shower this morning. And another thing, John selected Uber Pool. A little side note regarding Uber Pool. This has nothing to do with John or even the majority of Uber Pool passengers, but I should mention this. If you can't afford the extra $1 to get a regular ride, that's fine. But don't be a passenger who chooses Uber Pool, then gives the driver an attitude when the GPS reroutes him to pick up a new passenger. If you're that bothered with another stranger in the car, stop supersizing your french fries, save the extra $1, and you'll have the backseat all to yourself. So back to John. Since this was an Uber Pool ride, I knew there was a chance another person could be added. And that's exactly what happened. The GPS rerouted me to 77th Street. Picking up an additional passenger is normally fine, I guess, but on this day, it sucked. I wanted John out of my car ASAP. I got to 77th Street and picked up a woman who smelled absolutely wonderful. Her hair, her makeup, her nails, her perfume, everything was perfect. She smelled so good that I completely forgot about John. Uber Pool passengers normally sit together in the back seat, but I guess her intuition was strong that day because she sat in the front. Little did she know, that was going to be the best decision she made the entire day. So off we went, merging back onto the highway towards North Philly. The lady's perfume smelled so good that I eased off the gas pedal and enjoyed the ride. Until the GPS rerouted me. She must have changed her destination because Uber now wanted me to drop her off first. That pissed me off because I wanted John out. For one, I didn't want to smell him anymore, that's obvious. But more importantly, I wanted John out so I could speak to the lady alone. I had it all planned out. Excuse me, miss, I apologize for the last rider. He stunk up my car. You didn't think it was me, did you? I enjoy cleaning my car and I really appreciate your business and blah, 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 blah. Uber had other ideas. We got to the lady's destination and right before she got out, I took one more deep breath. Then the smell returned. About 10 minutes later, I dropped off John, then sped to AutoZone to buy the strongest cleaning products they had. That smell took forever to leave my car. This story proves that you'll never have total control over your driver rating. Honestly, I think the 1-star rating came from the lady. She got in my car and it smelled like trash, period. She probably told all her coworkers how disgusting I was. But oh well, I guess I shouldn't complain. The situation could have been a lot worse now that I think about it. As bad as John smelled, I should have been investigated for hiding a dead body. So there you go. The 1-star rating most likely came from the lady. Mystery solved. I guess the moral of the story is, don't take offense to low ratings. After all, you can't control who gets in your car. One passenger might be a doctor, and the very next passenger might be a teenage mutant sewer rat. Chapter 15. If I won the lottery, know what I'd do today? Probably drive Uber. I'd talk to passengers, take breaks at the mall, visit random parks. Wait, I already do that. If I won the lottery, I'd also teach a few days a week. I'd crack jokes with teachers, play basketball with students, hang out with janitors. Wait, I already do that too. Even if you never have to work ever again, you still need a reason for waking up. So why not teach and drive? They're perfect for lottery winners. You can work them on the same day or alternate them throughout the week. And something else to think about, neither job has a set schedule, so you can take vacation days whenever you want. Just like winning the lottery, the same is true for retirement. What better way to stay connected to society than by combining Uber driving and substitute teaching? Teaching connects you with the younger generation, and driving connects you with everyone else. Around 20 years ago, I worked with an 80-year-old guy named Bill. He and I would clean the freezing parking lot together, and no matter how cold it got, he never complained. Not only was he in perfect shape, but he loved working. He also talked his ass off every chance he got. My point is, he had so much energy, and this man was in his 80s. One day, I got to work early and saw Bill taking out the trash. I asked him why he was early, and he said, "Because I'm bored." That answer made no sense to me back then. "You're 80 years old," I said. "Why are you still working?" He stopped what he was doing and said, "You're only 20 years old, so this won't make any sense to you. But when you get to my age, you have to stay busy." Then he told me all about his retirement party, which was 15 years prior. Friends, relatives, and coworkers all gathered together to celebrate. According to him, it was one of the happiest days of his life. "I thought retirement was gonna be fun," he said, "but I was bored to death." When he initially retired, he thought that staying home and doing nothing was the best thing in the world. But it didn't last long. 2 weeks later, he was already back to work taking out the trash at a gas station. Like I said, I always get along with janitors. Bill and I talked often, and I'll never forget his work ethic. Because of our conversations dating back over 20 years ago, I always make sure to stay busy. I doubt he's still alive, but if he is, I hope he's driving Uber. A 100-year-old Uber driver. Now that would be an interesting book. In fact, I have the perfect title. Everyone buckle up. I taught at so many different schools at this point, and when it comes to Uber, I drove over 9,000 passengers, so please forgive me if I don't remember all of my experiences, but nonetheless, here are some honorable mentions that I'd like to share. Not too long ago, an Uber passenger was snorting drugs in my back seat. It happens pretty often, but this one stood out to me. I picked her up from Newcastle and dropped her off near the University of Delaware. She was a young brunette waitress who worked on Main Street. When I got to her destination, I heard a few clinging sounds followed by 3 heavy snorts. Then she quickly jumped out of my car without saying a word. After she closed the door, I drove 2 more blocks and immediately pulled over to check my back seat. I'm way too old to be riding dirty. I can't forget the time I picked up an old man from a bar in Claymont. It was only 3 p.m. and he was totally drunk. He wobbled to my car, barely opened the door, then dove in head first. During the 15-minute ride, it felt like he was my personal tour guide. He told me everything there was to know about the state of Delaware. We even went to the same high school, but over 30 years apart. "Back when I went to high school," he said, "it was all white guys. Our sports teams got our asses kicked." He was funny. Everything he said made me laugh. I didn't realize how drunk he was until I dropped him off, and the very next passenger found all of his belongings in my back seat. When I returned to his house about 30 minutes later, his German Shepherd ran out of the patio and jumped all over me. That was probably the happiest animal I've ever seen. His dog was probably thinking, "Finally, a sober person I can play with." Good thing his dog smelled me before 8 p.m. I probably ended up at the same bar as his owner. Another time, a real estate agent who wouldn't shut the hell up was in my car for over 30 minutes. He ran his mouth the entire ride, telling me all about his goals and dreams. "Last month, I was on a yacht in the middle of the ocean," he said, "and one day, I'm gonna buy a brand new Audi." At the end of the ride, he wanted to keep in touch, so I gave him my burner number. And as expected, the very next day, he called me with a money scheme. "Just give me 5 minutes," he said, "just hear me out." He told me about a multi-level marketing sales grind that I had absolutely no interest in. And believe me when I tell you, he did not stop at 5 minutes. He kept talking and talking and talking. Since he couldn't take no for an answer, I interrupted him and said, "Hey man, I'll be right back. I gotta use the bathroom." Then I hung up the phone and never spoke to him ever again. And that's why I love the Burner app. I drove an IHOP waitress to work one morning and we had a wonderful conversation. Unlike the real estate agent, she actually allowed me to speak. After telling me all about her college plans, she asked me what I do besides Uber. When I mentioned substitute teaching, she started laughing to herself. I asked her what was funny, and she said, "I just graduated high school and I can totally see you as a teacher. You're probably the coolest sub in Delaware." One time I subbed in the inner city with a teacher who played in the NFL. I forgot his name, but he played for the Miami Dolphins at the same time as Dan Marino. Even though he retired over 20 years ago, he was still solid muscle. I was in North Philly one day when I picked up a self-proclaimed psychic and her 7-year-old daughter. She was a black chick with a neon green weave and tattoos everywhere. The whole ride she was complaining about her life, but she kept telling me she was a psychic. She hated her job, she hated her daughter's father, and when I dropped her off, her place was a dump. The worst part of Philly you could imagine. I noticed there was a cemetery across the street, and she hated that too. I hate living across the street from a cemetery, she said. I kept thinking to myself, if you're a psychic, shouldn't you see these things coming? Then she offered to read my palm, but I told her no, I don't want to end up in North Philly. You might be wondering if I ever Ubered a student. 3 times to be exact. One time, a man got in my car and said, "Yo, Brandywine High School." I replied, "What? How'd you know I went there?" He said, "No, you were my teacher there." I said, "Oh, okay, my bad. I also went there." He laughed. Another time, I took a girl to the airport who immediately recognized me. "You look so familiar. Did you ever teach at Mount Pleasant?" I told her yes, then I gave her a copy of this book. She was so thankful too. "I'm gonna read this on the airplane," she said. She was so excited. She couldn't wait to hear my stories. The third time was when I picked up a couple people at the mall. 3 guys got my back seat and one of them said, "Yo, you look like my football coach." I asked them what school they went to, and when they said William Penn, I told them that I taught there many times. Then they all said, "Oh, that's right, I remember you. You subbed our math class." Whenever I'm bored, I usually teach at crazy schools just for fun. It's kind of selfish, but whatever. There's a particular school in Newcastle which I consider to be the worst place for substitute teachers. It's a middle school right next to the highway filled with black and Latino kids. I'm exaggerating a bit, but I think most of them are gang affiliated. They love me though, mainly because I let them show me their gang signs. One day, I witnessed a fist fight between a boy and a girl. If you're wondering why a teenage boy would want to fight a girl in the first place, like I said, middle school, in Newcastle, black and Latino. I don't know what started the argument that led to the fight, but they were cursing like crazy. And to make things worse, the class was instigating them. "What are you waiting for? Hurry up and fight." The boy and girl were squaring up with each other, but neither wanted to throw the first punch. They just kept cursing at each other. "Throw the first punch, bitch." "Nah, you throw it, pussy." Ugh, it was so annoying. I kept my mouth shut for over 20 minutes, but I knew I had to say something. After all, I'm the adult in the room, I guess. So I calmly approached them and said, "Hey, listen, if you want to fight, then fight. But if you don't want to fight, please sit down." As expected, they completely ignored me and kept cursing at each other. I thought to myself, they're not gonna fight. All talk and no action. So I went back to my desk and stared out the window. Then all of a sudden it was showtime. The girl slapped the boy so hard that it sounded like a firecracker went off. The class went crazy. The boy answered with a 2-piece combo and the class went even more crazy. Her legs buckled for a moment, but she broke her fall by grabbing his hair and slamming him against the wall. The girl was twice his size, so she tried to pressure him just like Bone Crusher tried to pressure Mike Tyson back in '87. But unfortunately, this strategy didn't work for her, or Bone Crusher for that matter. The boy took a step back and threw a punch. It was a body shot that landed on her ribcage, causing her to fall backwards over a computer table. The table hit the ground so loudly that 3 administrators ran in the room and removed the fighters. I didn't hear the official scorecards, but the remaining students in the class all agreed that the boy won. The fight only lasted 20 seconds, but it was very entertaining. But here's the funniest part of the story. There was a well-behaved student sitting next to me the entire time. He was the tallest kid in the room and he looked exactly like Biggie Smalls. Once the dust settled, he looked at me and asked, "Hey teacher, did I see you smiling during the fight?" I told him no and said that there was nothing to smile about because fighting is wrong. "It's not a laughing matter," I told him. Then he said, "Oh, because I thought I saw you smiling." So I denied it a second time. I thought he would leave me alone, but he wouldn't let it go. "Nah, yo, you were smiling," he said. "You were definitely smiling." No matter how much I denied it, he wouldn't believe me, so I finally told him the truth. I leaned in close and whispered, "You're right, I was smiling. I wanted them to fight so badly." The kid laughed and said, "Yeah, me too. I wanted them to kill each other." Then we laughed and gave each other a fist bump. Then he said the funniest thing that I ever heard in my entire life. He looked at me and said, "You don't seem like a teacher." If you're wondering why school fights are entertaining to me, hear me out. First of all, they're gonna fight whether I'm there or not. And if they don't finish the fight in school, they'll finish it after school. Do you really think they care what I have to say? They don't care about me or my bald head. And that's exactly what they say to me. I don't care about you or your shiny bald head. But there's something else I need to mention. As substitute teachers, we're not allowed to break up fights. As crazy as it sounds, breaking up fights could get me fired, or even worse, sued. So if kids want to fight, let them fight. My only job is to call the office after the first punch is thrown. And to be honest with you, I don't always call right away. Like I said, if they want to fight, let them fight. Another time, I remember picking up a die-hard Trump supporter from an Audi dealership. From the moment he got my car, we agreed on every subject, from fake news, September 11th conspiracies, and all types of New World Order stuff. The heat index was over 100 degrees that day, and I was taking him to a golf course. He was in my back seat drinking a whole bunch of water when he said, "I need to hydrate as soon as possible. Otherwise, I'm gonna pass out on the golf course." I agreed with him and replied, "Hey, did you know that light beer is scientifically proven to hydrate the body way better than water?" When he heard that, he started laughing his ass off. "Finally," he said, "another grown man who drinks the cheap stuff." One time, I picked up a junkie from 8th Street near downtown Wilmington. The Uber app said the passenger's name was Shirley, but when I got to the house, a man jumped in. He had injection rashes all over his arms and looked like he never had a haircut. But he was very polite. He called me sir over 10 times during the ride. Within 1 minute of getting in my car, he was leaning in the creepiest fashion possible. Imagine someone sitting in your back seat, bending over so far forward that their forehead is touching their toes. From a seated position, his body was literally folded in half. I thought he was dead. All of a sudden, the radio started playing "We Didn't Start the Fire" by Billy Joel. When he heard that, he quickly woke up and asked, "Excuse me, sir, can you please turn this up?" After turning up the volume, he went crazy. He started bobbing his head and pumping his fist. He looked like he was at a concert. I couldn't believe how alive he looked. He looked great. Until the song ended. Then he went back to zombie mode, head-to-toe configuration. Just say no, kids. Just say no. Honestly, I felt bad for him. Now I know he made his own decisions in life, I get that. But still, this guy looked rough. I wanted to help him out, so I asked if he wanted to stop at Wawa. "Yes, I love Wawa," he said. I replied, "Me too, my brother, me too." So I drove to the nearest Wawa and parked in the corner. He went inside, got some food, smoked a few cigarettes in the parking lot, then back on the road we went. A little later, we also stopped at a grocery store so he could get some food for his house. I knew he didn't have access to a car, so I happily drove him around the city. While getting paid, of course. Thanks, Shirley. What an exciting life. What a thrilling way to make a living. The random life strikes again. Where will the next passenger take me? When is the next hallway fight? Nobody knows, so stay tuned. Chapter 16. This book is a substitute teaching guide for Uber drivers. Wait, no, it's an Uber driving guide for substitute teachers. Actually, better yet, it's a guide to the random life. If you're bored, try either of these jobs. If you really want some excitement, combine them. You could teach in the morning and drive in the evening. Or even better, drive before the school day begins, then teach during the day, then continue driving after school. Your Uber shifts will surround your teaching schedule, like a sandwich. In fact, that's what I call it, the teacher sandwich. I dare you to eat that sandwich for 1 week and see what happens. It's just a guess, but I'm pretty sure you'll quickly become addicted to the random life. About this book. This book is not intended to offend any members of the public school system or offend anyone who drives for a living. It's only an attempt to make light of my daily encounters. The motivation to write this book originally came from a compliment. On the same day that a student told me that I was the best teacher, an Uber passenger told me that I was the best driver. From that day forward, I documented all of my experiences and decided to share them with the world.